So the function f is defined like this here. F of x equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 11. And it's defined for all real values of x. ये आपके पास एक क्वेश्चन है. सबसे पहले वो कहते हैं express f of x in the form a into x plus b whole square plus c where a, b, and c are constants. So you have to convert it to that form first. So that's the completed square form. Square complete करना है आपने यहाँ पे. That's all you have to do. So how do you complete the square? You first of all have to make the coefficient of x square 1. X square के coefficient जो भी होगा आपने उसको common ले लेना है बाहर. So you take 2 common. When you take 2 common, what are you left with inside? You have x squared minus 4x inside. You leave some space, and outside you've got 11. हमने सिर्फ क्या किया? First 2 terms से 2 को common ले लिया. And then you look at the coefficient of x, ignoring the sign, that's 4. You add the square of that, and you also subtract the square of that. Now inside the brackets, these first 3 terms are going to give you a perfect square. It's x minus 2 whole square. Remember, यहाँ से हमारे पास x आ गया. The second term gives us the sign, and the third term gives us this number that's inside. That's x minus 2 whole square. ठीक है? ये बाएं वाला जो number है ये, that's left is minus 4, and we close the bracket. So plus 11. We simplify this. ये 2 को multiply कर दिया अंदर. We get 2 into x minus 2 whole square minus 8 plus 11, and that gives us 2 into x minus 2 whole square plus 3. ठीक है? तो ये quadratics वाला part हमने जो quadratic chapter हमारा first chapter था हम इसमें cover किया था. How to complete the square. That's what you're asked to do in the first part here. ठीक है? हमने square complete कर लिया. Now in the second part it says state the range of f. State the range of f. So now this is the function. And it's defined for all real values of x, right? What's the range of this function? The values of y. Anyone? How do you find the values of y here? Range क्या होगी इस function की? How do we calculate that?
Sir, turning point.
Turning point देखेंगे, right? It's a quadratic function. It's going to be a U-shaped curve, which looks like this. U-shaped curve है. Turning point है हमारे पास इसका. हमने जब square complete कर लिया, we know the turning point. इसका sign change कर दिया. Minus 2 था उसको plus 2 कर दिया. The sign outside remains the same. The turning point is 2, and that's the turning point. So what's the range of this function? Vertically, a graph कहाँ से कहाँ तक जा रहा है? It's above this point 3. 3 के equal है उससे ऊपर. 3 से नीचे नहीं जा सकता. So the range of this graph, therefore, range of this function, therefore, is, you can say y greater than or equal to 3, or you can say f of x greater than or equal to 3. That's the range of this function. Does that make sense to everyone? Any problems with this?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, good. Let's look at the third part. The third one में क्या कहता है? Explain why f does not have an inverse. Why this function f does not have an inverse. Why does it not have an inverse?
It's not a one-to-one function.
It's not a one-to-one function, right? So हमने क्या कहा था? हमने कहा था inverse function सिर्फ कब exist करता है? It only exists for one-to-one functions. Inverse exists only for one-to-one functions. ठीक है? अगर यहाँ पे देखें हम, this is not a one-to-one function. It fails the horizontal line test. आपने यहाँ पे क्या लिखना है? आपने लिखना है, it's not a one-to-one function because, sorry, it does not have an inverse because it's not a one-to-one function. Right? This is enough. If you want, you can also explain why you are saying it's not a one-to-one function. You can basically say it fails the horizontal line test. If you draw a horizontal line, you can draw one horizontal line at least. That cuts the graph at 2 points, so it's not a one-to-one function. That's why it does not have an inverse. Just I'm going to explain why it does not have an inverse, because it's a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-one function. Is that okay to everyone? Any problems? Any questions on this? Let's look at part D. So I'm assuming there are no questions. The function g is defined by this. So now we have another function, and that's the function g. It's defined like this. It says g of x is equal to 2x squared minus 8x plus 11, and x is less than or equal to a. This is the domain that we have given. Now look at this function f and look at the function g that we were given earlier. They have exactly the same expressions. ये भी वही है और ये भी वही है. They have the same expressions. What's the difference between them? The only difference is that their domain is different. यहाँ पे x could be all real values. Here it says x is less than or equal to a. ठीक है, सिर्फ ये difference है इन दोनों functions के दरम्यान. A is constant. It says state the largest value of a for which g has an inverse. Largest value of a for which g has an inverse. Now, how do we think about this? A की क्या value हो सकती है largest for which it has an inverse? It's a 1 mark question. You just have to state that value. That's why it's only 1 mark. Okay. Let's say this is what the curve looks like. We know it's not a one-to-one function, and the reason for that is it does not pass the horizontal line test. अभी तो ये one-to-one function नहीं है. What was the turning point? The turning point, अब हम इस expression की बात कर रहे हैं. इस expression का turning point क्या था? इस expression का turning point was 2 and 3. We found that earlier. It was 2 and 3. अच्छा, अब उसने क्या कहा है? इसकी डोमेन उसने रिस्ट्रिक्ट कर दिया. उसकी डोमेन इसने क्या कर दिया? रिस्ट्रिक्ट कर दिया. It's less than or equal to some value. Now we don't know what the value of a is. A क्या है? उसका हमें नहीं पता. ठीक है? अच्छा. Now this is the x-axis. The x-axis is going to be something like this. ये आपका x-axis है. We know that the value here is 2. This value is 2. Now let's say this A was here on the right side. Let's make that assumption for now. Let's take that assumption. A was here. Let's say A was here. इसका मतलब है this function would be defined for all values less than or equal to A. ये आपका पूरा फंक्शन यहाँ तक इस तरह से डिफाइंड होता अगर A यहाँ पर होता तो. Right? That's what we're assuming. Is this a one-to-one function? The yellow part here, is this one-to-one?
Yes.
Is the yellow part one-to-one?
No.
No, sir.
Why not?
Sir, because the horizontal line crosses and touches, if we make a horizontal line, then it will touch 2 points on the graph.
Yeah, so we can draw this line, for instance. This cuts the graph at 2 points. We can draw at least one line like this. If we can draw at least one line like this, that means it's not one-to-one. So ये तो one-to-one नहीं है. तो A मतलब यहाँ पे नहीं हो सकता. Does that make sense? अगर A यहाँ पे होता, तो it would not be a one-to-one function. ठीक है? अच्छा. So let's say A was on the left side. A यहाँ पे left side पे होता है instead. A यहाँ पे नहीं होता. Let's say A was here on this side. इधर होता. Then if you were to say x is less than or equal to A, then the graph that you're considering as your function is this part. Is this one-to-one? Is this one-to-one?
Yes.
But it isn't the maximum possible value.
It's not the maximum possible value, but that's not the question right now. I'm asking, is this one to one? ये one to one है?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
It
sir.
is one to one, right? It's one to one. So we can draw any horizontal line that we draw through this yellow part. It only cuts the graph at one point. So this is one to one. लेकिन उसने क्या कहा है? So basically A की ये एक possible value हो सकती है. This is one possible value of A. If A was this, the function would be one to one, and the function would have an inverse. अगर यहाँ पे A होता, इस function का inverse होता फिर. उसने क्या कहा है? State the largest value of A for which G has inverse. तो वो A की कोई भी value नहीं पूछ रहा. उसने कहा है largest value of A आपने बतानी. इस A पे तो आपकी value इस A पे तो आपका inverse exist करता है. But can we actually increase this value of A? We can increase this a bit. हम थोड़ा सा नीचे चले जाएं अगर यहाँ तक आ जाए. Does our function still have an inverse?
Yes.
Yes.
It's still one to one, right? What about now?
Yes.
And we can keep going on until we reach the turning point. Turning point तक हम आगे. अभी तक भी आपका ये function one to one है. इस point तक भी. लेकिन इससे अब थोड़ा सा भी आगे जाएंगे इधर, it will no longer remain a one-to-one function, because then you can draw a horizontal line here and say कि ये तो दो point से pass कर रही है. Turning point से थोड़ा सा भी आगे गए तो फिर वो one-to-one नहीं रहेगा. Turning point पे अगर आके आप रुक जाएं, इस point तक ये आपका one-to-one function रहता है. ठीक है? तो अगर मैं कहूँ A की value में 2 लगता हूँ, then the function would have this domain x less than or equal to 2. This will still be a one-to-one function. So the largest possible value of A that we can have in this case is 2. क्योंकि 2 से थोड़ा सा भी आगे चले गए तो हमारे लिए हमारा वो one-to-one function नहीं रहेगा. 2 तक हम आ सकते हैं. 2 या उससे पीछे भी चले सकते हैं. So the largest value of A that you write here therefore is equal to 2. This is going to be your result here, your answer here. कि आप 2 तक जा सकते हो, उसके आगे नहीं, उससे आगे नहीं जा सकते. So generally when you have a problem like this, यहाँ पे उसने smallest value of something पूछी हो such that the function has an inverse, the largest possible value पूछी हो such that the function has an inverse, generally it's going to be the turning point. For example, इस question को वो उल्टा भी कर सकता था. वो कहता है, let's say the domain is x greater than or equal to A, और फिर आपसे वो पूछा state the smallest value of A for which it has an inverse. Largest की बजाय वो smallest पूछता और domain को वो कहता है x greater than or equal to A. So now in this case we would have been considering the part on the right side. फिर हम right side से देख रहे होते हैं. अच्छा ये part ये one to one है. Then we can keep going towards the left side and stop when we get to the turning point. तो यहाँ पे smallest value of A जो है इस केस के अंदर वो greater than equal to A लिखा होता. Smallest value of A would have been 2 in that case. वहाँ पे बस smallest value होती है अगर आप right side वाला part consider कर रहे होते. So it comes from there, from the idea कि quadratic function को जब आप दरमियान से break कर देते हो turning points से, दोनों parts individually one-to-one functions होते हैं. So that is where it's coming from. तो आपके पास क्या हो गया यहाँ पे? You say the largest value of A in this problem would be 2. Okay. So that's the largest possible value of A that we have. Now let's look at the fifth part. It says when A has this value, obtain an expression in terms of x for G inverse, for G inverse, and also state the range of G inverse. Okay. Now let's think about this. This is part 5. हमें A B C D लिखा हुआ है यहाँ पे, so just write E part. You have the function G, and that is equal to 2x squared minus 8x plus 11. And the domain now is x less than or equal to 2. So for when A has this value, which value हमने पिछले part में find किया? 2. you have to find G inverse. So now the domain is x less than or equal to 2. That's what we're given. We need to find the range. We need to find the inverse of this function. Remember, inverse के लिए क्या करना पड़ता है आपको square complete करना पड़ता है. ये उसने आपसे already first part में करवा लिया होगा. तो आप वो वाली form use करोगे, completed square form. You'll say this is actually the same as saying 2 into x minus 4 whole square. No, it wasn't 4. It was 2, I think. 2 into x minus 2 whole square plus 3. That's the completed square form. You can use that here to find the inverse. Okay, so you follow that process. You convert g of x to y. That becomes y equals 2 into x minus 2 whole square plus 3. You make x the subject after this. And that gives you 2 into x minus 3 whole square equals y minus 3. And that becomes x minus 3 whole square equals y minus 3 over 2. You take square root on both sides.
So is it x minus 3 or x minus 2 whole square?
X minus 2 whole square. I'm sorry. This is x minus 2 whole square. So you get x minus 2 equals square root of y minus 3 over 2. But remember, when we take square root, we also put plus minus. Okay? Then we take this 2 to the other side, and it becomes 2 plus minus square root of y minus 3 over 2. Now, at this point, we have to choose whether we're going to put plus here or minus here. So which one of the two do we use? Plus or minus? Anyone?
Minus?
Minus?
Sir, we
Why?
use minus.
So because we want the domain is less than 2, less than or equal to 2.
Yes. So the domain is less than or equal to 2. What that means is we want this value to be less than or equal to 2. So when you're adding something to 2, वो तो बड़ा 2 से बड़ा हो जाएगा. When you subtract something from 2, that will give us what we want. So we say we should put the negative sign here. So we have x equals 2 minus square root of y minus 3 over 2. You'll get 2 marks until this point, and then 1 mark for choosing the sign correctly. That's 2 minus square root of x minus 3 over 2. So that's 3 marks until this point. ये आपके पास inverse आ गया. So it was g, not f. So I'll just change that to g instead. It's g inverse of x equals this. That's 3 marks. And then it says, also state the range of g inverse. G inverse की range भी आपको बतानी है. What about that? What's the range of this inverse function? What's the range of this inverse function?
X less than equal to 2.
Range क्या होती है? Range
The
is
domain
values of y.
function.
Range is values of y. X तो नहीं होगा ना, y होगा. Y क्या होगा?
Y is less than equal to 2.
Y is less than equal to, right? Why? Because we know range of the inverse function is the same as the domain of the original function. Original function की domain क्या है? X less than or equal to 2. उसने बताई हुई है. That means the domain range of the inverse function is going to be y less than or equal to 2. ठीक है? ये लिख सकते हैं. Or you can say g inverse of x is less than or equal to 2. You can write any of them. That's the range of the function. Okay. So there are two functions f and g. They are defined as follows. F of x equals x squared minus 2x, g of x equals 2x plus 3. We have to find the set of values of x for which f of x is greater than 15. f of x is x squared minus 2x, and g of x is 2x plus 3. And both of them have this domain that x can be any real number. X can be any real number. We have to find the set of values of x for which f of x is greater than 15. So first part, f of x greater than 15. What does that mean? ये पूरा expression है that is greater than 15. X squared minus 2x is greater than 15. That's a quadratic inequality. You can solve that quadratic inequality. कैसे solve करते थे? Remember quadratic inequalities? We would say x squared minus 2x minus 15 greater than 0. We would treat this as an equation. X squared minus 2x minus 15 is equal to 0. We will find the x-intercepts of this function. X squared minus 3x, minus 5x plus 3x minus 15 equals 0. And that gives us x into x minus 5 plus 3 into x minus 5, that equals 0. X plus 3 into x minus 5 equals 0. X equals minus 3 and x equals 5. These are the two possibilities that we have. So what about the solution for this inequality then? इस inequality का क्या solution आएगा? What do we write at the end? Anyone? What are the possible values of x? याद है किसी के quadratics?
X is less than minus 3 and greater than 5.
X is less than minus 3 or greater than 5. So remember how we used to think about this? This is a quadratic curve. It's a U-shaped curve. हमने क्या किया है? हमने इसके intercepts निकाल लिए हैं. We have this intercept. This is minus 3. This is 5. We're looking at the part of the graph that is greater than 0, above the x-axis. We're looking at this part and this part. ये कौन से parts हैं x-axis के ऊपर? Greater than 5 and less than minus 3. So you say either x is less than minus 3 or x is greater than 5. This is your result here. Axis. We're looking at this part and this part. ये कौन से parts हैं x-axis के ऊपर? Greater than 5 and less than minus 3. So you say either x is less than minus 3 or x is greater than 5. This is your result here. Okay. Any problems with this? Any problems?
No, sir.
Let's look at the second part. Second part में वो क्या कहता है? Find the range of f and state with a reason whether f has an inverse. Okay. F of x equals x squared minus 2x. That's the function f that we have. Okay, so find the range of f and state with the reason whether f has an inverse. Okay, range find करनी है आपने इस function की. It's a quadratic function. How do you find the range? You need the turning point. यहाँ पे वैसे तो x की all real values possible है, ठीक है? तो y axis के ऊपर आपके पास क्या possibilities होंगी? You know, it's a quadratic curve. Since it's a quadratic curve, it's going to look like this. It's going to be a U-shaped curve. ये इसकी shape होएगी, and it's going to have a turning point. तो range find करने के लिए आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा? आपको ये turning point निकालना पड़ेगा. You'll have to figure out what this turning point is, because once you know that, then you can write down the range. So how do you find the turning point? You have two methods for that. You can either use completing the square, or you can use x equals minus b over 2a, whichever you prefer. Minus b over 2a यहाँ पे use करें. What do we get from that? Minus into minus 2 over 2 into 1, and that is 1. X value 1 आ गई. What's the corresponding value for y? 1 square minus 2 into 1, and that is going to be minus 1. So the turning point therefore is 1 and minus 1. ये आपके पास turning point आ गया. ठीक है? So you get the turning point, 1 and minus 1. So what's the range then? Minus 1 से ऊपर कुछ भी हो सकता है. Minus 1 से ऊपर कुछ भी हो सकता है. So you say the range of the function is therefore y greater than or equal to minus 1. Or you can say f of x greater than or equal to minus 1. ठीक है? We've done this so many times. आपने सिर्फ क्या किया? Turning point निकाल लिया. Turning point से ऊपर आप रह रहे हो. ठीक है? That's the range. But then it also says state with a reason whether f has an inverse. So what do you write here? Does it have an inverse or not?
Say it does not.
It does not have an inverse because यहाँ पे देखें domain क्या है? All real values of x. यानी कि पूरा function consider कर रहे हैं. पूरा function क्या है? This whole thing. This is not one to one, so it does not have an inverse.
So
You
do
also
we
have to write
state
the
the reason as well?
Yes, you have to state the reason because it says state with a reason.
So you say
Okay.
it's not a one-to-one function because it does not pass the horizontal line test. So we write that.
Yes, so the reason in this case would be that it's not a one-to-one function. That's actually enough. That's sufficient. But if you want to explain further, that's even better. But it's not a one-to-one function. The reason for that is that it does not pass the horizontal line test. But what I'm going to write here is going to be sufficient. You say f does not have an inverse. F does not have an inverse. Why? Because it's not a one-to-one function. This is another reason for this actually. That's possible.
Yeah.
No, never.
Yeah, that's not going to be feasible for most people. So yeah. Okay. Let's look at the last part of this. We have to sketch in a single diagram the graph of y equals g of x and y equals g inverse of x, making clear the relationship between the graphs. Have we sketched any graph until now of inverse function? We haven't, right?
No,
Okay,
sir.
nahi kiya. Okay. So yes, so that's something that we want to do today. The graph of g of x and g inverse of x. Let's try to make it. G of x हमारे पास क्या function है? G of x is 2x plus 3. Let me write that here. G of x is 2x plus 3. And the domain that we have for this is all real values of x. हम क्या करेंगे? We will have this grid. This is y, this is x. अच्छा, अब यहाँ पे आपने एक चीज याद रखनी है. Whenever you're drawing the graph of an inverse function, to write that here. Whenever you draw the graph of an inverse function, you need to use a square grid. Now, what does that mean? It means you need to have the same axis or the same scale on both axes. दोनों के ऊपर स्केल सेम होना चाहिए, यानी जितना डिस्टेंस यहाँ पे आप 1 कह रहे हो उतना ही डिस्टेंस दूसरी साइड पे 1 होना चाहिए, ठीक है? And you'll realize the reason for that in a moment. -2, -3, -4, 2, 3, 4, -1, -2, -3, -4. So we have these points here, okay? And we have 2, 3, 4. अच्छा, आपको क्या करना है? आपको ग्राफ बनाना है g of x का और g inverse of x का. These are the two graphs that you need to make. Let's draw g of x first. Y equals g of x, that's this graph. Y equals 2x plus 3. This is a straight line, right? It's a straight line. How do you draw graphs of straight lines? You take any 2 points. You take 2 points, उनको plot कर देते हैं, उनको join कर देते हैं straight line के साथ. So you can take for instance 0. X equals 0 के पर क्या value आती है? 3. That's one point that you have here. You can mark that point here. Take any other point on your graph. Let's say यहाँ पे positive side पे लूँगा तो graph से ऊपर चला जाएगा. Let's say I take -3. अगर मैं -3 लेता हूँ, माइनस पे क्या वैल्यू मिलती है मुझे? 2 into -3, or let me take another value because I want to show something else to you as well. Let's say -2. If I take -2, -2 पे मुझे क्या मिलता है? -1. So I take these 2 points, 0, 3 and -2, -1. This is here, and the graph looks like this. You have a line passing through these points. This is the graph of g of x. The points that we took were 0, 3 and -2, -1. Any problems with this? ये clear है? Straight line graph है, 2 points लिए, उनको plot कर दिया, उनको join कर दिया. Does this make sense to everyone?
Yes.
How do we draw the graph of the inverse function now? One idea is that you find the inverse of this function first, and then you take 2 points on that inverse function, और फिर आप उनको plot करें. That's one idea that you could use. Okay? But is there any other way to do this without actually finding the inverse function?
Sir, I'm not sure if this is correct, but can you switch the values of x and y?
Exactly. So this was g of x. This was g of x that we just drew here. Inverse में क्या होएगा? Remember, inverse में आपके coordinates interchange हो जाते हैं. Coordinates interchange हो जाते हैं. So since you remember, inputs become outputs, outputs become inputs. When you find an inverse, उल्टा हो जाता है. So this 0, 3 here means for an inverse function, if you were to input 3 into that, you'll get 0. And if you were to input -1 into that, you'll get -2. So inverse और original function के अंदर जो आपके coordinates होते हैं, अगर ये g of x है और ये g inverse of x है, if you have x, y here, it becomes y, x there. Coordinates flip, interchange हो जाते हैं. ठीक है? So that means this point that you had here at 0, 3, for the inverse function, it will be at 3, 0. And this point that you had at -2, -1, for the inverse function, it's going to be at -1, -2, and that's this point. You have 3, 0 here, and you have -1, -2. And then you just draw a line through these points, and it looks like this. That's the graph of the inverse function. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We just interchange the coordinates. Coordinates को interchange कर दिया. Inverse find करने की जरूरत नहीं है. बस आपने directly वो coordinates लिख दिया और उनको आपने graph बना दिया. But that's not enough. It says sketch in a single diagram the graphs of y equals g of x and y equals g inverse of x. We're done with that. Making clear the relationship between the graphs. these graphs are related to each other. Now, if you remember your O-level transformations, जब आपके coordinates flip होते थे, वो कब होते थे? There was a certain kind of reflection that you used to have. Basically, ये जो दोनों graphs हैं, they are reflections of each other in this line y equals x. कोई भी फंक्शन हो और उसका इनवर्स फंक्शन हो, ये दोनों ग्राफ y equals x के अंदर रिफ्लेक्शन होते हैं. It's a general rule that we have for a function and for any function and its inverse. तो आप जब भी इनवर्स का ग्राफ बनाते हो, आपको एक चीज क्या करनी होती है साथ, आपको एक ये लाइन बनानी होती है जिसका आप डॉटेड बनाते हो, y equals x line, and you then say the graphs of g of x are reflections of each other in the line y equals x. That's the relationship that we have between these graphs. Okay? So the relationship that you have is that g of x and g inverse of x are reflection of each other, or they're reflections of each other in the line y equals x, and that is always true for a function and its inverse. तो इनवर्स का ग्राफ आपने बनाना हो तो आप ओरिजिनल फंक्शन के ग्राफ के कोऑर्डिनेट्स इंटरचेंज कर देते हो, और रिलेशनशिप क्या होता है दोनों के दरमियान में हमेशा, the reflections in the line y equals x. So that's another point that you need to know about. Go forward in this class. So let's begin. So we have a function. This function f of x is equal to 2x minus a, where a is a constant, and this function is defined for all real x, right? So x k domain jo hai, that's all real values of x. First of all, it says, in the case where a equals 3, solve the equation f of x equals 11. So it's a composite function, f of x. We can write it as f squared of x as well. F of x equals 2x minus 3. ठीक है? A की value अगर हम 3 input करते function के अंदर, it becomes 2x minus 3. So that's what we have. We have to solve the equation f of x equals 11. That's what we want to solve. Okay. So what do? We have another bracket here, like this. We say it's f of 2x minus 3 equals 11. And then we input 2x minus 3 in the function f. So it becomes 2 into 2x minus 3 minus 3 equals 11. Okay. And now we can solve this further. We get 4x minus 6 minus 3 equals 11. And that gives us 4x equals 11 plus 9, that is 20. X की value हमारे पास यहाँ से क्या आ जाएगी? It turns out to be 5. Right? So that's what we had to do in the first part. We had to solve this equation. Does this make sense to everyone? Any problems with this?
Yes.
Okay. So that was the first part. F of x equals 11. ये हमें equation solve करनी थी. We did that. Left side पे composite function था, वो evaluate करके हम इसको 11 के equal कर दिया, and you find the value of x from that. So that's 3 marks. We're done with that. Let's look at the second part. Now we have another function that's x squared minus 6x, and it's also defined for all real values of x. G of x, let me write that down here. So now we've got another function that's g of x, and it's x squared minus 6x. Okay, we have to find the value of a for which the equation f of x equals g of x has exactly one real solution. Now, what does that remind you of? Exactly one real solution. What does that mean? वो क्या बात है? One real
Tangent to the
solution.
curve.
Tangent to the curve. Yes, okay, that's correct. So we have a curve and we have a straight line. इन दोनों को equate करें. The line would be a tangent to the curve. algebraically इसका क्या मतलब होगा? So that's graphically, yes. The line will be a tangent to the curve. So what happens when we have something like that?
Is equals to 0.
B squared
Discriminant,
minus 4ac.
yes, discriminant is equal to 0. So b square minus 4ac, the discriminant, that is equal to 0. Remember, इसके तीन cases होते हैं ना, greater than 0, equal to 0, less than 0. When we have one real solution, that means b square minus 4ac should be equal to 0. Okay, so that's what we have here. So let's input this, these two functions equal, f of x equals g of x, इनको equate कर देते हैं. So let me write f of x here as well. F of x was 2x minus a, right? Remember, the value a equals 3 was only for the first part. Second part, it's not relevant anymore. A की value तो आपने find करनी है second part में, ठीक है? So we have to show that this has exactly one real solution. F of x equals g of x. You have to show that this has exactly one real solution. No, so we have to find the value of a for which this equation has exactly one real solution. Okay, a की value find करनी है, given that it has one real solution. Now, let's equate them. F of x equals g of x. We get 2x minus a, that equals x square minus 6x. Okay, we take everything to one side, it becomes x square minus 8x plus a equals 0. Now this equation should have only one root. One root का मतलब क्या होएगा? b square minus 4ac should be equal to 0. Okay, हम क्या करेंगे? Minus 8 whole square, that's b squared minus 4 into a is 1 into a, 4 into 1 into c, which is actually a here, that equals 0. Simplify this, we get 64 minus 4 times a equals 0, and a turns out to be equal to 16 from here. So the value of a that we were looking for is equal to 16. Okay, so
No,
that's the
sir.
second part. That's the second part. Okay, so now we've got this function h of x, that's x square minus 6x. It's the same function as before in terms of expression. वही x square minus 6x ऊपर भी रखा हुआ था. We've got the same thing here. But now it's defined for x greater than or equal to 3. It's defined only for this domain. Domain is restrict हो गया. Express x square minus 6x in the form this. This is a completed square form. Square complete करना है वहाँ पे बस. Let's do this third part. X square minus 6x का square complete करना है. So what do? We add 3 square and then we subtract 3 square. And what does that give us? That gives us x minus 3 whole square minus 9. Okay? So that's the completed square. X minus 3 whole square, and then outside we've got this minus 3 square, that is 9. That was the third part. In the fourth part, they ask us to find an expression for H inverse and also state the domain of H inverse. Domain of H inverse बतानी है और आपने साथ क्या करना है? H inverse निकालना. Now what is H inverse? Let me write that down. What is H of x? H of x is x square minus 6x, and the domain that we're given for this is x greater than or equal to 3. That's the domain that we're given, x greater than or equal to 3. Now we have all, so remember, in order to find the inverse of a quadratic function, we first have to complete the square. We have already done that in the previous part. इसने आपसे करवाया है पहले. So we can write it as h of x equals x minus 3 whole square minus 9. And now what we do is we say let y equals h of x, and that gives us y equals x minus 3 whole square minus 9. We take 9 to the other side, it becomes x minus 3 whole square equals y plus 9. We take square root on both sides, that gives us x minus 3 plus minus square root of y plus 9. And x equals 3 plus minus square root of y plus 9. So that's the function that we get. But now, do we choose the plus sign here or the minus sign? प्लस चूज करेंगे यहाँ पे या माइनस चूज करेंगे? हाउ डू वी डिसाइड दैट? एनीवन?
Plus.
It would be plus.
Plus, and it will be plus. The reason for that is the domain is x greater than or equal to 3. The domain is x greater than or equal to 3. That means we want values that are greater than 3. So 3 से बड़ी values कैसे आएंगी? We'll have to add something to 3. 3 plus something करना पड़ेगा. उससे हमारे पास 3 से बड़ी value आएगी. Right? So that's why we choose the positive sign here. We say it's 3 plus square root of y plus 9. And that gives us h inverse of x equals 3 plus square root of x plus 9. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Any problems with this?
No, sir.
So you don't have to find the inverse function only, you also had to write the domain of h inverse. Now, how do you write the domain of h inverse? What's the domain of this inverse function? What's the domain of this inverse function?
The range of the function.
Range of the function.
Range of the original function, right? Inverse function की जो domain होगी वो original function की range होगी. So range of f of x is what is going to give us the domain of, sorry, not f, यहाँ पे function जो है वो h है. Range of h of x is going to give us the domain of h inverse of x. Now, what's the range of h of x? We have this function x minus 3 whole square minus 9. इसकी range कैसे find करेंगे? We'll have to think of the graph, right? It's a quadratic function. It's a quadratic function, and the graph of this function looks something like this. The turning point is going to be 3 and minus 9, right? From this form, we could find the turning point 3 and minus 9. This is the turning point. And the domain of the function is as greater than or equal to 3. So, कौन सा part defined a function का? It's the part on the right side of the turning point. So, what's the range of this function?
Y is greater and
Is,
equals to
yeah,
minus 9.
greater than or equal to minus 9. So, minus 9 के ऊपर हो सकते, ऊपर value हो सकती, ठीक है? So, that's the range of this function. So, what do you write here? You say the range of the original function was greater than or equal to minus 9. That means the domain of h inverse should be greater than or equal to minus 9. X की values minus 9 के equal होंगी और उससे बड़ी होंगी h inverse function में. Let's look at an example. Using this example, we will try to figure out कि इस तरह के functions की हम range कैसे find किया करेंगे. We've got these two functions here. One is f of x equals 3 over 2x plus 1, and the other is g of x equals 1 over x and then plus 2. Now let's look at them one by one. We've got this function f of x, and that is 3 over 2x plus 1. The interval that we're given, the domain that we're given is x greater than 0. ठीक है? अब हम फिर से क्या देखने हैं? अच्छा, इसमें देखें reciprocal functions के ना turning points नहीं होते कोई, so you don't really have to worry about turning points as such. ठीक है? और मसला सिर्फ होता है जब ये ग्राफ जहाँ पे broken होता है, तो in A levels they don't really give questions जहाँ पे ग्राफ के दो पार्ट्स एक साथ आ रहे हो. ये नहीं होगा कि ये वाला पार्ट भी आ रहा हो, ये वाला पार्ट दोनों इकट्ठे आ रहे हो, या तो दोनों में से एक साइड होगी, या राइट साइड वाली साइड होगी या लेफ्ट वाली साइड होगी. So you will only have to deal with extreme values. आपने सिर्फ end points पे check करना होगा कि क्या हो रहा है. आपने सिर्फ end points check करना होगा. So for instance, in this turning point भी नहीं है ना, turning point भी कोई नहीं है, मतलब कोई इस तरह की value नहीं है जहाँ पे minimum value आ रही हो या maximum value आ रही हो. This turning point as such. So turning point के बारे में भी आपको नहीं सोचना. You only have to think about the end points of the domain. अच्छा, अब end points क्या हैं इनके? X greater than 0 लिखा हुआ है. So what's the minimum value of x that you can have? It's something close to 0, right? 0.000001, so something very close to 0. What's the maximum value that I can take here? मैक्सिमम वैल्यू इज इन्फिनिटी, एक्स की वैल्यू जितनी मर्जी बड़ी हो सकती है। अच्छा यहाँ पे ना इवन दो इसमें वर्किंग आपको कुछ शो करने की जरूरत नहीं होती, बट फॉर योर नोट्स, फॉर योर ओन अंडरस्टैंडिंग, I'm going to do is I'm going to just write down a couple of notations here that I will be using when I'm explaining this, which you should, be a bit comfortable with. For example, I'll be using this notation a lot here as something, or let's say as x goes to or approaches infinity. जब मैं ये लिखूंगा ना, इसका मतलब क्या होता है? इसका मतलब है as x approaches, ये जो arrow sign है, this translates to approaches, and then you have infinity here as x approaches infinity. Or in other words, we are saying okay, so as x goes to infinity, or you can say as x approaches infinity, what this means is as x becomes very large, as the value of x becomes very large. तो ये नोटेशन मैं यहाँ पे यूज कर रहा हूँ, these are equivalent, right? इनका एक मतलब है. So I'll be using this notation as x approaches infinity. ठीक है? This is what it means. अच्छा, now let's see what happens here. 0 एक पॉइंट है, 0 पे हम चेक कर सकते हैं क्या वैल्यू आती है. 0 पे क्या वैल्यू आती है? We get 3 over 2 into 0 plus 1. What does that give us? That gives us f of 0 equals 3. एक पॉइंट आपके पास ये आ गया. जब x की वैल्यू 0 इनपुट करते हैं तो y की वैल्यू हमारे पास 3 आ जाती है. ठीक है? Now let's look at the other extreme. x की वैल्यू अगर बहुत लार्ज हो जाए, x की वैल्यू बहुत लार्ज हो जाए, what happens in that case? So now I'm going to write that as x becomes very large, as x goes to infinity. This is the function that we have, right? It's 3 over 2x plus 1. इस function को क्या होएगा? Let's look at it step by step. x बहुत बड़ा हो जाएगा, 2x plus 1 को क्या होएगा? Any idea? Infinity को आप 2 से multiply कर दो और उसमें 1 add कर दो. What do you get? Is anyone there?
Infinity.
It's still infinity, right? एक
Yes.
बहुत बड़े नंबर को आपने 2 से मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया, उसमें 1 ऐड कर दिया, it's still an extremely large number. ये भी बहुत बड़ा नंबर. But then what about 3 over 2x plus 1? हमने एक कांस्टेंट को डिवाइड कर दिया इतने बड़े नंबर से. So you can think of it like this.
Small.
Extremely small, right? So 3 over, let's say 1 0 0 0 0 0, you can keep adding zeros to this. 3 over an extremely large number, 3 divided by an extremely large number, this will be extremely small. It will approach 0. ये 0 के बिल्कुल पास चला जाएगा. So what is happening here in this function? जब x की वैल्यू बिल्कुल 0 के पास है, x की वैल्यू बिल्कुल 0 के पास है, इस फंक्शन के अंदर over 2x plus 1 था ना. अब वैल्यूज चेक करके देख. अब कैलकुलेटर में ये फंक्शन डालें. Just try to understand what's happening. 2 into this plus 1. ये आप कैलकुलेटर में इस तरह से डाल दें. And then just try inputting some values and see what pattern emerges from that. For example, अब यहाँ पे x की वैल्यू 0.0000 या in fact 0 इनपुट करते हैं तो क्या आता है? हमने यहाँ पे किया था x equal 0 इनपुट किया हमने, हमारे पास फंक्शन की वैल्यू क्या आ गई? We got 3. अब x की वैल्यू का आप बड़ा कर दो, because x is greater than 0 now. So now keep increasing the value of x. So let's try x equals 10. x equals 10 पे y की क्या वैल्यू आ जाएगी? You get 3/21. x equals 100, उस पे क्या वैल्यू आ गई y की? You get 3/201. x equals 1000. What do you get from that? You get y equals 3/2001. So you see what's happening to the values of y? They are decreasing. वो छोटी होती जा रही है. जैसे जैसे ये x बड़ा हो जाएगा, y जो है वो 0 के पास पहुंच जाएगा. As x approaches infinity, y goes to 0. So आपकी जो range होगी इस function की वो क्या होगी? It will be between these two values. We'll say f of x is between 0 and 3. That's the range of this function. Does this make sense? Any questions on this? दूसरे function को हम next time देखेंगे. अब यहाँ पे equality का sign हम क्यों नहीं डालेंगे? Because एक तो x greater than 0 लिखा हुआ था, 0 पे हमें 3 मिला, तो 3 के साथ इसलिए इक्वालिटी का साइन नहीं डालेंगे, बिकॉज 0 के साथ नहीं डाला हुआ था. और फिर यहाँ पे वी आर सेइंग व्हेन x approaches infinity, the value of the function approaches 0. It doesn't become exactly 0, it's approaching 0. 0 के पास जा रही है. So इसलिए यहाँ पे भी इक्वालिटी का साइन हम नहीं डालते. We say the function's value can be between 0 and 3. This is the range of this function.
Won't there be one point when it actually becomes 0?
No, because if you've got 3 in the numerator. You've got 3 in the numerator. तो 3 को आप किसी भी नंबर से डिवाइड कर देंगे, exactly 0 तो नहीं होगा ना, वो बहुत छोटी वैल्यू होगी, लेकिन 0 के इक्वल तो नहीं होगा ना. It will be approaching 0.
Okay.
Right? Okay, let's look at the function g of x. g of x देखते हैं. g of x function क्या है अब? g of x is 1 over x plus 2. 1 over x plus 2, and the domain of this function is also x greater than 0. What about the range of this function? Again, we think of it the same way as before. X की limits क्या है? X की limits क्या है? Lower limit is 0. What about the upper limit? There's no upper limit. So x जो है, that's essentially between 0 and infinity. इसके दरम्यान में कहीं भी हो सकता है. Right? That's what x is. अब 0 के ऊपर वैल्यू देख सकते हैं, 0 पे वैल्यू देख सकते हैं, बट कैन यू रियली जस्ट इनपुट 0 हियर? ऊपर वाले फंक्शन में हमने 0 इनपुट कर दिया था बिकॉज वहां पे डिनोमिनेटर में 0 नहीं आ रहा था, बट यहाँ पे कैन वी जस्ट इनपुट 0 हियर? दैट्स अनडिफाइंड. इससे हमें कुछ नहीं मिलता, 0 इनपुट नहीं कर सकते. But then how do you think about this? You think about what happens at the points that are very close to 0. x greater than 0 है ना, so what could be the least value of x? यहाँ पे 0 अगर इनपुट कर सकते होते हम, फिर तो हम कर देते, लेकिन यहाँ पे मसले हम 0 इनपुट कर नहीं सकते, डिनोमिनेटर में 0 आ गया, तो हम क्या करें फिर? We think of values that are very very close to 0. So think about this. X equals 0.00000. You can add as many zeros as you want. What about this value? इस पे क्या आपकी फंक्शन की वैल्यू होगी? 1 over 0.000000001 plus 2. What's this value? ये number क्या आएगा? Is it going to be something small, something large? What do you think?
Something large.
Something very large, right? Because 1 को आप डिवाइड कर रहे हो बहुत ही छोटे नंबर से, बहुत छोटे नंबर से डिवाइड करो, उसमें 2 ऐड कर दो, it's still a very big number. So think about it this way कि अब x की वैल्यू 0 के इक्वल तो नहीं कर सकते ना. अब इस तरह सोच सकते हो, when x is very close to 0, 0.0001 like this. Or to be more precise, you think of it this way. You say as x approaches 0. Remember मैंने इस notation को क्या बताया था, क्या होती है? Approach करना. When x approaches 0, what happens to 1 over x? 1 over x क्या होता है? जब x की वैल्यू 0 के पास जाएगी, 1 over x is going to approach infinity. ठीक है? 1 over x अगर infinity की तरफ जाएगा, what about 1 over x plus 2? Infinity में 2 ऐड कर दें. That's still infinity, right? That's still a very large number. Infinity का मतलब है it's something very large. You add 2 to something extremely large, it's still something extremely large. So x आपके पास एक ये आपके पास लिमिट आ गई, दैट इज इन्फिनिटी। वाई एक्सिस के ऊपर आपकी वैल्यू जितनी मर्जी बड़ी हो सकती है। अगर एक्स की वैल्यू बहुत छोटी है तो वाई की वैल्यू यहाँ पे बहुत बड़ी हो सकती है। अच्छा, सो एक तो हमने देख लिया जीरो पे क्या होता है, ठीक है। यहाँ पे हम क्या कर रहे हैं, एक्स की वैल्यूज हमें पता है दे कैन गो फ्रॉम जीरो टू इन्फिनिटी, राइट, इनके दरम्यान में हो सकती हैं। तो हमने जीरो पे देख लिया। अच्छा, जीरो पे इस पास जाती है तो वाई की वैल्यू क्या हो जाती है, इट बिकम्स इन्फिनिटी। नाउ लेट्स लुक एट द अदर एंड। अगर x की वैल्यू बहुत लार्ज हो जाती है, if x goes towards infinity, if x becomes very large, if x becomes very large, what about 1 over x? 1 over x क्या हो जाएगा?
Very small.
Very small,
Smaller
right? So,
number.
so it's going to be very close to zero, right? So 1 over x आपका बहुत छोटा हो जाएगा. So it's a very simple concept, you know. आपके पास कोई भी फ्रैक्शन है, अगर डिनोमिनेटर बहुत बड़ा हो गया है, if the denominator is very big, the result is going to be very small. If you have a fraction where the denominator is very small, the result is going to be very big, right? Numerator में तो constant है ना, उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. अगर denominator बहुत बड़ा हो जाएगा, you get something small. Generally, small is going to be something very close to zero. Big is going to be something like infinity. यहाँ पे you've got something very big, that's infinity. Denominator something very small, and that's zero. So that's what we are actually thinking कि denominator में सब कुछ बहुत जीरो के करीब चला जाए तो आपकी वैल्यू इन्फिनिटी पे जा रही होगी, और अगर डिनोमिनेटर में कुछ चीज इन्फिनिटी के पास चली जाए आपकी वैल्यू ओवरऑल जीरो के पास जा रही होगी. ओके, सो दोज ऑफ यू वांट टू डू इट दैट वे, आप उसको इस तरह से याद कर सकते हैं 1 over 0 अगर आप कर दोगे, you can think of it as infinity right now, but remember it's going to you're going to suffer because of this when you go to university later on. After the first course, so almost all of you, no matter which field you go into, आपको वो course in most degrees आपको वो करना पड़ता है, basic calculus का, basic maths का. So you will need to relearn this there, right? You can think of it this way at this point. अगर नीचे डिनोमिनेटर में आप इन्फिनिटी इनपुट कर दो, बहुत ही बड़ा नंबर, इसका रिजल्ट जो है आपके पास जीरो आ जाता है. बट दिस इज नॉट वेरी एक्यूरेट मैथमेटिकली, दैट्स दिस डिस्क्लेमर. अगर आप इसमें सोचना चाहते हैं आप इस तरह सोच सकते हैं. ओके, सो व्हाट हैपेंस हियर, as x goes to infinity, as x becomes very large, what about 1 over x? 1 over x बहुत छोटा हो जा रहा है. Then what about 1 over x plus 2? 1 over x plus 2 क्या होगा? It's 0 plus 2, and that's 2. आपके पास दो लिमिट्स आ गई, एक आपके पास आ गया 2 और एक आपके पास आ गया इन्फिनिटी. ठीक है, तो यू हैव टू बी बिटवीन 2 एंड इन्फिनिटी. 2 और इन्फिनिटी के दरमियान में होगा वो फंक्शन ऑन द वाई एक्सिस. आप इसको इस तरह लिख सकते हो, between 2 and infinity, or you can just simply say g of x is greater than 2. That's the range. Let's say you have y equals 1 over x minus 2 whole square, and the domain that you're given is x greater than 5. And now you need to find the range of this function. इसकी range निकालनी है. How do you do this? Again, you have to think of the end points. Domain के end points आपने देखने हैं, ठीक है. Domain के end points क्या हैं? 5 से लेकर infinity तक, right? That's what the domain is. It's between 5 and the upper limit. There's no upper limit, so that's like infinity. The upper limit is infinity. Okay, सो आप एक देख लें 5 पे क्या वैल्यू है. 5 इनपुट कर सकते हैं इसके अंदर, 5 इसके अंदर इनपुट कर सकते हैं हम, उसमें कोई मसला नहीं है. सो लेट्स जस्ट इनपुट 5 पे देख लेते हैं. लेट्स कॉल दिस f of x. सो हम यहाँ पर लिख लेते हैं f of 5 इवैल्यूएट कर लें. व्हाट्स f of 5? 1 over 5 minus 2 whole square and
1 over
that
9.
1 over 9. You get one value here. ठीक है, 5 पे ये वैल्यू आ गई. But then you think about what happens when x becomes very large. x की वैल्यू बहुत बड़ी हो जाए. ठीक है, अब इसमें एक तरीका ये भी है, आप बहुत बड़ी वैल्यू इनपुट कर दें उस फंक्शन के अंदर. मतलब थिंक ऑफ अ वेरी लार्ज वैल्यू एंड यू नो see what happens to this function. x की आप कोई भी बहुत बड़ी वैल्यू इनपुट कर दें, 1 डाल दें, 1 के साथ जितने मर्जी जीरोस आप ऐड, जितने जीरोस आप ऐड कर सकते हैं कैलकुलेटर के अंदर कर दें, x की जगह वो नंबर डाल दें, and see what you get. You get something extremely small. So how do you think about this? You say as x becomes very large, so क्या मतलब है, as x becomes very large, as x approaches infinity, what happens to this function? Let's do it step by step. x minus 2 whole square जो आपका डिनोमिनेटर है उसको क्या होएगा अगर x की बहुत बड़ी वैल्यू डाल दो. What happens to this? Any idea? ये नंबर क्या होगा, बहुत छोटा होगा या बहुत बड़ा होगा? x minus 2 whole square.
सर बड़ा आएगा.
सर बहुत बड़ा.
बहुत बड़ा होगा ना, बिकॉज बहुत लार्ज नंबर्स में से सिर्फ 2 सब्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हो and then you're squaring that. It's also something very large. So it's still infinity. It's still something extremely large. But then you are saying 1 over x minus 2 whole square. 1 को डिवाइड कर दो इस बहुत ही बड़े नंबर के साथ. What do you get? It approaches 0. बहुत ही छोटा नंबर हो जाएगा because you're saying 1 over an extremely large number. The other idea which I just said, which I just told you, is to input a very large number on your calculator. Calculator में डाल के देख लें. 1 over 1 0 0 0 0 0 0. You can keep adding zeros. Minus 2 का whole square. Evaluate this. आपका calculator आपको आंसर देगा something into 10 raised to power negative, an extremely large number. So that's very close to 0. So say it approaches 0. इतना छोटा number है वो, बिल्कुल 0 के पास जा रहा है. ये आप calculator में डालोगे, you'll get something like this. Okay. So that's another way to actually think about this. आप calculator में उस तरह की values डाल दें. Okay, for example, जब 0 के आसपास हो तो आप 0.000000 डालते रहें और आप एक 1 डालते हैं इनके ऊपर. Put that value in your calculator and you'll get some idea कि आपका रिजल्ट कैसा आ रहा है, बहुत बड़ा आ रहा है या बहुत छोटा आ रहा है. You'll get an idea about that, या किस वैल्यू को अप्रोच कर रहे हैं. ठीक है, I'll tell you about that in a moment. वो exactly आप किस तरह से करोगे इन दोनों प्रॉब्लम्स के अंदर अगर आप कैलकुलेटर पे उस तरह सोचते हो. लेट्स कंप्लीट दिस. यहाँ पे हमारे पास 2 लिमिट्स आ गई, एक 1 over 9 आ गई, एक 0 आ गई. What do you say? You say the range of this function is between 0 and 1 over 9. That's the range of this function. 0 1 over 9 के दरमियान में. Again 1 over 9 क्यों नहीं इंक्लूड कर रहे हैं हम, क्योंकि उसने 5 नहीं इंक्लूड किया हुआ था, उसमें इक्वालिटी का साइन नहीं था. 0 क्यों नहीं इंक्लूड कर रहे, because it's not getting exact, it's not becoming exactly 0, it's getting very close to 0. So 0 itself included नहीं है क्योंकि ऊपर 1 था. 1 over something is going to be very close to 0 but not exactly 0. So that's why we don't have equality signs here. Equality sign नहीं डाल रहे हम, क्या कह रहे हैं, सिर्फ 0 से 1 over 9 आपकी रेंज है इसके अंदर. Okay, now let me quickly tell you the other way you could estimate this range using a calculator. So let's think of these functions. उसने क्या दिया हुआ यहाँ पे, x is greater than 0. ठीक है, greater than 0. Now a lot of you might find this easier. You can think of it this way. अगर 0 input कर सकते हैं, 0 input कर दें. 3 over 2 into 0 plus 1. यहाँ पे तो input कर सकते हैं 0. यहाँ पे input कर दिया, we got 3 from that. ठीक है, अच्छा. What's the other extreme for x? यहाँ पे x किसके दरमियान में हो सकता है, 0 से लेकर infinity तक. 0 input किया, हमारे पास 3 आ गया, चलो एक पॉइंट तो आ गया. अब infinity तो हम नहीं डाल सकते कैलकुलेटर में, right? We don't have a number for infinity. What you do is you input an extremely large number on your calculator. So let's try doing this. 3/2 into 100, or you can input, and to make it even larger, just put 999. Keep adding nines as many as you want. 99999. जितने मर्जी nines डाल दें, and then plus 1. Tell me what this value turns out to be. अब calculator आपको क्या return करेगा? Calculator क्या value दे रहा है?
1.5 into 10 raised to the power minus 9.
1.5 into 10 raised to the power minus 9. What do you think this number is? 10 raised to the power minus 9. It's an extremely small number. So it's very close to 0, basically. So what do you say here? The range is from f of x to f of x between 0 and 3. That's the range of the function. Similarly for g of x. G of x की क्या आपकी domain है? 1 over x plus 2. अब यहाँ पे क्या मसला है? 0 input कर सकते हैं यहाँ पे, 0 नहीं input कर सकते. That's the problem, right? 0 यहाँ पे input आप करेंगे कैलकुलेटर के अंदर, आप कैलकुलेटर क्या करेगा? आपको एरर दे देगा. You'll not get a value here. So what do you do then? Greater than 0 है ना? X greater than 0. You put a value that's very close to 0 but slightly above 0, right? On greater than 0 and the 0 से थोड़ी सी बड़ी value डाल दें. So you can try, for instance, 1 over 0.0000. Keep adding zeros, as many as you want, and then you have plus 2. What do you get for this? Anyone who has the result? ये क्या मिलता है आपको?
A very large value.
But what's that large value? Give me a number. What number are you getting?
So 1, then there are 9 zeros to it. Achha,
Okay, then add 2 to that. Plus 2 भी कर दें.
yeah, then you add 2 उसके end पे.
सर मैथ एरर आ रहा है.
Math error आ रहा है.
नहीं,
Do-
1 into 10 raised to power 10.
ये करें, ये जो मैंने ये लिखा है यहाँ पे, ये करें. प्लस 2 भी डाल दे साथ, उसके अंदर प्लस 2 भी डाल दे.
सर वही किया है, 1 into 10 raised to power 10 आ रहा है.
Okay, 1 into 10 raised to power
10.
10. What do you think about this number? It's an extremely large number. You can say it's going towards infinity. बहुत बड़ा number हो रहा है. Right? बड़ा number आ गया ना कोई, इसका मतलब infinity की तरफ जा रहा है. Does that make sense?
Yes sir.
Yes.
Let's see what happens on the other side. Infinity बहुत ही बड़ा number हो जाएगा. बहुत बड़ा number हो जाए फिर क्या होएगा? So let's put a very large number. 1 over जिस तरह हमने ऊपर किया था, 1 over 999999999. Add as many nines as you want, and then you have plus 2. What do you get for this? क्या result मिलता है इससे?
2.
Sir 2.
Exactly 2?
2 point, yes, 2.0.
No, I'm getting exactly 2.
Yeah, so some calculator versions will probably just give you 2 there, or exact value क्या होगी? 2.00000000. You can keep adding zeros, and then at some point you'll have 1, right?
Yes.
So you understand कि अच्छा ये 2 के पास जा रही है. It's not exactly 2, but it's getting very close to 2, right? So what do you say then? The range is between 2 and infinity, and that's between 2 and infinity, or in other words, you can just say it's greater than 2. That could also be another way to think about this. Very crude, but it works. You can say a composite function f g of x can only be formed if the domain of the outer function or the range of the inner function, if the range of the inner function, in this case it's g, is a subset of or is contained by the domain of the outer function. Domain of the outer function. So composite function exist करने की ये condition है, ठीक है? If this does not hold true, the composite function cannot exist. उसमें error आ जाएगा. So you cannot write an expression for that. Is that okay to everyone? Any problems? So that's about composite functions. Now let's look at an example, and that will clarify this a bit more. But any question on this, on the concept as of this point? No problems? How many of you think you understand it now? Okay. Yes. Yeah, so that's something separate. So that always holds true. So this is one thing. अगर आपको composite function की domain चाहिए, this is one rule that we have for that. Okay, this is separate. This is something separate. There's no conflict here. Domain for what? In this case, if it existed, yes, it will be all real values. Yes. Yes. इसमें तो ये valid ही नहीं है ना, इसमें तो valid ही नहीं है. Yes, this won't be true either. ये यहाँ पे तो exist नहीं करता ना, अगर वो exist करता फिर ये होता. यहाँ पे तो fg of x function exist नहीं करता. So this condition is only when the function exists in the first place. अगर function exist करता है तभी आप उसकी बात करें. अगर वो exist नहीं करता फिर तो it doesn't make any sense. We're not. Why would we look for the domain of the composite function if it doesn't even exist? So if it exists, then the domain of the composite function is the domain of the inner function. Okay. So there are two things that you need to know about here. One is the relationship between the range of the inner function and the domain of the outer function. In most cases, in fact, all the cases that you'll see in the past papers at least, you will say they are the same. Range of the inner function should be the same as the domain of the outer function. That's the only way a composite function would exist. But this is more mathematically accurate कि equal भी हो सकते हैं और उसका subset भी हो सकते हैं, then it will exist. Okay. The other thing that you need to understand from here is the domain of the composite function is actually the same as the domain of the inner function. These are two things that you need to sort of remember from here. आप use करनी होगी. Okay. What's the range of the composite function? You will find the composite function. You will have the domain of the composite function. And just like you find the range of any composite function, you'll use the domain. Just like you find the range of any function, जो आपकी domain दी होगी, उसको use करके we'll find the range, depending on what the function is like. No, we can't. So we'll have the function depending on what type of a function that is, whether it's quadratic, whether it's linear, or something else, reciprocal. वो जिस तरह हम बाकी सब functions की range find करते हैं, उसी तरह इसकी भी range find करेंगे. Okay, so there's a function f, and that is such that f of x is equal to x plus 3 for x greater than or equal to 0. So we're given this function. F of x equals 2x plus 3 for x greater than or equal to 0. And there's another function g that is ax square plus b, and the domain for that is less than or equal to q. X is less than or equal to q. A, b, and q are constants here. You're also given the function fg. You're given the composite function fg. Fg of x is 6x squared minus 21, and the domain for that is x less than or equal to q. You see, this domain of the composite function is the same as the domain of the inner function, right? जो inner function की domain वहाँ पे लिखी हुई थी, वही आपकी domain composite function की भी है. So they will always be the same. Now, first of all, we have to find the values of a and b. A or b दो constants हैं, इनकी values figure out करनी है. How do you find them? So we can find our own fg of x. We have the function f, we have the function g. हम fg of x खुद से निकाल लेते हैं, and then we just compare it with what's given there. So you have the function f, you have the function g. How do you evaluate fg of x? Fg of x would be f of g of x. F के अंदर g input करना है. So that's f of ax square plus b. Okay. Now, wherever in the function f you had x, you replace that with ax square plus b. We have plus 3 after that. You get 2ax square plus 2b plus 3. That's the composite function that you are getting. Okay? You were given that the composite function is actually 6x square minus 21. So you can just compare the two. You say, this is what we are getting, and we were given that fg of x is actually equal to this. That means they should both be identical. So the coefficient of x square in both of them should be equal. And similarly, the constant in both of them, they should also be equal. So we get two equations from that. We get 2a equals 6, or 2b plus 3 equals minus 21. From here, we get a equals 3 and b equals minus 12. We have the values of a and b. So we were given the composite function. We were given that this is 6x squared minus 21. हमने खुद से composite function निकाल लिया because we were given the function f and g as well. And then we just compared with what was given to us. We found the values of a and b from there. Okay. So I'll actually just give you a minute to note any important information from the question ताकि आपके पास वो सामने हो when you're doing the rest of the parts. So you can write down the functions that you have, f of x, g of x, their domains, and the function fg of x, so that you know what information we are given in the question when we are doing the rest of the parts. Okay. Now in the second part, it says, find the greatest possible value of q. Find the greatest possible value of q. This is part 2. The functions f and g are these two functions. The composite function that's being formed is f g of x. ये composite function आपका form हो रहा है. What's the inner function? The inner function is g. This is the inner function. the outer function is f, when can the function f g of x exist? इसके exist करने की क्या condition है? Range of the inner function, इसका हम इस तरह से लिख सकते हैं, it's a subset if you want, but for our purposes it's actually enough. It's a range of the inner function and the domain of the outer function, they are sort of related. ठीक है? Because अगर range में कोई ऐसी चीज आ जाएगी जो आप outer function में input नहीं कर सकते, then that would be a problem. ठीक है? So what's the range of the inner function should correspond to the domain of the outer function. What's the domain of the outer function? Greater than or equal to 0. इसका मतलब ये हुआ, this is the range of domain of the inner function is x greater than or equal to 0. ठीक है? That means the range of the inner function, what's the inner function? It's g of x. That should also be greater than or equal to 0. G की domain क्या होनी चाहिए? It should be greater than or equal to 0. Now using this domain, using this range, you can figure out what this domain should be. Does that make sense? Range of the inner function and the domain of the outer function, we're looking at the relationship for them. Domain of the outer function wo kya thi? It was x greater than or equal to 0. That's the domain of the outer function. That means the range of the inner function should also be the same. Okay? That gives us g of x greater than or equal to 0. Now what we can do is we can just solve this further. इससे हम x, इसकी corresponding value of x निकाल लें. So we have ax square plus b there. Let me actually write down the values of a and b in that. A क्या है? Yeah, a is 3 and b is minus 12. Since g of x is greater than or equal to 0, that means 3x square minus 12 should be greater than or equal to 0. And you can find the value of x from here. Does that make sense to everyone? So what do we get from this? If we solve this, we get x squared minus 4 greater than or equal to 0. We factorize this, we get x plus 2, x minus 2 greater than or equal to 0. We have two intercepts, minus 2 and 2. Since it's a greater than sign, we're looking at these sides. So we say either less than this or greater than this. So the values of x that we are getting are x less than or equal to minus 2 or x greater than or equal to 2. Right? This is then going to the quadratic inequality solve. You would find the x-intercepts and look at the region on the graph that's either above the x-axis or below the x-axis. Right? That's what you would look at. We've got two possible sets of values. Less than or equal to 2, greater than or equal to 2. Which one of them are we looking at? यहाँ पे देखिए क्या sign है? Less than or equal to something. Less than or equal to something. So we are going to consider this one. Right? वो less than or equal to की बात करें ना, दूसरी domain ये भी possible है, but that's not what's given in the problem. उससे हमें सिर्फ क्या कहा है? Less than or equal to some value कहा हुआ है. So we're going to be looking at this one that we have on the left. So domain क्या हो सकती है आपके पास? It can be x less than or equal to 2, equal to minus 2. What were we asked about? Find the greatest possible value of q. Q की largest possible value क्या हो सकती है यहाँ पे? It's minus 2. Largest possible value of q, that is -2. Because we're comparing it with what? We're comparing it with x less than or equal to q. We were given x less than or equal to q. So q -2 या उससे कुछ छोटा हो सकता है. So the largest possible value of q is -2. Set of the domain of the outer function. These are two important points that you need to remember. Let's look at the third part. It says it is now given that q is equal to -3. So now you're given a value of q. उसने एक value बता दिया. Find the range of fg. Okay. fg function हमारे पास था पहले. Let's write that down here. Part 3. fg of x is equal to, what was that? 6x squared minus 21. And the domain that we were given for that was x less than or equal to q. अब उसने क्या कहा है? उसने कहा q की वैल्यू क्या है? -3. So you input that value here. You need to find the range of this function. Now it doesn't matter if it's a composite function or something else. You have a quadratic expression. You're given a domain for that. You can find the corresponding range. कैसे find करते हैं? क्या करेंगे यहाँ पे? It's a quadratic function. We can input -3. That's one point. That's one important point that we have. -3 input कर दिया. What do we get? 6 into -3 whole square minus 21. What's this going to give us? 54 minus 21. That's 33. F of -3 turns out to be 33. एक value आपके पास ही आ गई. But then quadratic functions में we also have to look for the turning point. Now let's see what the turning point for this would be. What about the x coordinate of the turning point? What's the turning x coordinate of the turning point? 2. Are you sure? X coordinate of the turning point. It's 0. How do you get that? You can complete the square if you want. You can actually write it like this. Like this, you can say this is 6 into x minus 0 whole square minus 21. यहाँ पे x term है ही नहीं आपके पास. This is one way to think about this. Or you could say x equals minus b over 2a. वो use कर ले. What's b here? B is not in the expression. That means इसका coefficient 0 आएगा. That's 0 over 2 into 6, which is just 0. X coordinate 0 आ गया. You input that back in the function, you get -21. That's the turning point. But what's the domain that we have? The domain is less than or equal to -3. That means वो तो यहाँ पे left पे आ रहा है उसके. -3 and 33. The function is only valid for this part. Turning point is not in our domain. वो domain के वैसे ही बाहर है. So what's the range of this function then? Greater than or equal to 33. That's the range. So the range of this function, the range of fg, you can say y greater than or equal to 33 if we want, or you can say fg of x is greater than or equal to 33. That's the range of this function. Okay. Simple quadratic function था, उसके हमने बस देख लिया, turning point पे check कर लिया, और वो जो एक end point था उस पे check कर लिया. This one last part. Find an expression for fg inverse of x and state the domain of fg whole inverse. Now, don't get confused कि ये fg और उसका फिर inverse, it's something very complicated. Basically, it's all you already have fg function, उसका inverse निकालना है. ठीक है? You already have the function fg. Let's write that down. The function fg of x is 6x square minus 21 and the domain is x is less than or equal to minus 3. इसका inverse निकालना है. We don't even need to complete the square here. It's already a completed square. एक ही आपके पास x term है. So we can directly make it the subject. X term तो है ही नहीं, x square है sir, right? So we don't really need to worry about that. We just say let y equals fg of x. That gives us y equals 6x square minus 21. We can make x the subject here. 6x square equals y plus 21. X square equals y plus 21 over 6. We take square root on both sides. We have plus minus square root of y plus 21 over 6. But then which one of plus or minus we consider? Minus, because this is less than or equal to minus 3. How can we get a value that's less than or equal to minus 3? We can only get that with a negative sign and not with a positive sign. So we say fg का जो inverse है, that is minus square root of x plus 21 over 6. That's the inverse function that we have. Right, so we just replace x with that inverse thing at the end, और right side पे आपने y की जगह पे x कर दिया. Okay. It also says state the domain of fg inverse. What's the domain of fg inverse? We found that in the previous part. Domain of fg inverse is actually the same as the range of fg. Range of fg उसने पिछले part में हमसे निकलवाई है. That was greater than or equal to 33. That was the range of fg. So we can say since this was y greater than or equal to 33, the domain hogi that's also greater than or equal to 33. That's where it comes from. That's the domain of this function. Another one. Okay, let's try this. This is from a recent paper. I am not sure which paper it is. You can search for that. We haven't done this in class, right? हमने class में तो नहीं किया ना? Does anyone remember seeing this question before? No, I think. Okay, let's try this. We have this function, these two functions f and g defined. They're defined like this: f of x equals something and g of x equals something. We first have to express f of x in the form x minus a whole square plus b. Square complete करना है. I'm going to do that quickly. X square minus 4x plus 3. Right, this was the function. So we say plus 2 whole square minus 2 whole square. And we had this plus 3 outside. Okay, the first 3 terms here give us a perfect square. It's going to be x minus 2 whole square. And outside we've got minus 4 plus 3, which is minus 1. ये आपके पास f of x आ गया. ठीक है, ये आपने square complete कर लिया. That was the first thing that you had to do. ठीक है, that's 2 marks. It is given that f is a one-to-one function. इसने बता दिया कि f one-to-one function है. That's now given. It's given that f is a one-to-one function. They have told us that here. State the smallest possible value of c. What's c? ये आपकी domain है function f की. X greater than c. X greater than c. This is the domain of this function. Given that it's a one-to-one function, we have to state the smallest possible value of c. C की smallest possible value क्या होगी? Any idea, anyone?
2.
It should be 2. Yes. So how do we think about it? It's a quadratic function, right? So part B, we know it's a quadratic function and it has a shape like this. We know the turning point for this already. The turning point is 2 and minus 1. That's the turning point. X greater than C है. यानी right side वाला graph आपने देखना है. तो C की वैल्यू लोएस्ट कहाँ पर हो सकती है? You can keep going like this, keep going to the left like this. सबसे लीस्ट वैल्यू आपकी यहाँ पे हो सकती है. इससे राइट पे अगर होएगा तो आपका 1-to-1 फंक्शन होएगा. अगर आप थोड़ा सा भी और लेफ्ट पे आ गए, it's no longer going to be a 1-to-1 function, right? So we say the smallest possible value that we have for C here is equal to 2. The smallest possible value of C is equal to 2 here. Because 2 से अगर नीचे आ जाएगा तो आपका 1-to-1 function नहीं रहेगा. ठीक है, we've done this in class before multiple times as well. ठीक है, smallest value आपके पास ये आ गई. अच्छा, now it says it's now given that C equals 5, find an expression for f inverse of x and state the domain of f inverse. f inverse find करना है और f inverse की domain बतानी है. Okay, let's do that. C की value 5 बताई है उसने, right? Keep that in mind. Now that's applicable to both parts, part C and also part D. दोनों के ऊपर applicable है, right? Now let's think about it. Part C. We have the function f of x that is equal to x minus 2 whole square minus 1. इसकी computed square form है. C की value उसने 5 दी हुई है, so that means the domain is x greater than 5. Right? Domain क्या थी? X greater than C थी ना पहले. Now it's given that C equals 5, so the domain is x greater than 5 now. C की जगह 5 input कर दिया. That's the function that we have. This is the function f of x. We want to find the inverse of this function. How do you find the inverse of this function? You say let y equals f of x, and that gives you y equals x minus 2 whole square minus 1. Make x the subject. X minus 2 whole square equals y plus 1. Take square root on both sides. That gives you x minus 2 whole square. Sorry, x minus 2 equals plus minus square root of y plus 1. You take 2 to the other side and becomes 2 plus minus square root of y plus 1. Now, what do we choose here? Plus or minus?
Plus.
Plus, because we want a value of x that is greater than 5. X की value greater than 5 होनी चाहिए. Greater than 5, 2 में से कोई चीज प्लस करके आएगा या माइनस करके आएगा. 2 में कोई चीज प्लस करेंगे तो greater than 5 आएगा. माइनस करने से तो नहीं आ सकता. So we say we choose the positive value here, not the negative value with the square root, and the function f inverse is therefore going to be 2 plus square root of x plus 1. This is the inverse function. ठीक है, inverse function आ गया. अब दूसरी चीज उसने पूछा था state the domain of f inverse. F inverse की domain बतानी है अब आपने. What do you think is the domain of f inverse? Again, it's going to be the same as before. जब हमने पहले देखा था, range of f is going to give us the domain of f inverse of x, right? But how do we find the range of f of x here? Range क्या है इस function की?
Y is greater than or equals to minus 1.
Okay, so the range they're saying is, so this turning point, remember, is 2 and minus 1. So you're saying the range is greater than or equal to minus 1. Is that correct? Any problem with this?
No, sir.
Yes, sir. Shouldn't it be with 5? Like we find the value of y when x is 5.
Yes. So you see, where is the function defined? The function is defined for x greater than 5. ये turning point तो आपके domain में आ ही नहीं रहा. आपका तो function सिर्फ 5 के left side, 5 के right side पे defined है. So x की value अगर यहाँ पे 2 है, there's going to be some value on the function where x is 5. The function is only defined towards the right side of that value. Turning point में x की value 2 है and that's not part of your domain. तो turning point पे function आ ही नहीं रहा. Function सिर्फ यहाँ पे ये वाला yellow part है, right? So you have to find the value of the function when x equals 5. X की value 5 input करेंगे यहाँ पे. 5 minus 2 whole square, that's 8. 9. 9 minus 1 is 8. So this value that you get here is plus 8. So आपकी range पे क्या होगी? It's going to be everything that's equal to or greater than 8. ये आपकी range होगी इस function. Does that make sense?
So shouldn't it be only greater to 8, not equal
Greater,
greater to
yes,
8?
yes, greater than 8, yes, because 5 included नहीं है यहाँ पे,
Yeah.
तो यहाँ पे 8 भी include नहीं करेंगे, so it should be greater than 8. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Greater than 8, that's the range of this function. We say y is greater than 8, that's the range of that function. इसका मतलब है f inverse की domain क्या हो जाएगी? X greater than 8, that's the domain of the inverse function. Any problems with this?
No, sir.
No, sir.
ठीक है? अच्छा, let's look at the last part. It says find an expression for gf of x and also state the range of gf. Okay, let's try doing this. Part D. So, what functions do we have now? We have g of x function. G of x was 1 over x plus 1. 1 over x plus 1, and the domain for this was x greater than minus 1. And we have another function that's f of x, and that is equal to x minus 2 whole square minus 1. And the domain for this is x greater than 5. These are the two functions that we have. What do we have to figure out? We have to figure out an expression for gf of x and also state the range of gf. Range बतानी है gf की, पहले उसका expression निकालना, of course. So let's find gf of x. Gf of x, we have a bracket here like this. Okay, that means it's going to be g of x minus 2 whole square minus 1. तो g function के अंदर जहां पे भी x आ रहा है, x की जगह पे आपने ये input कर देना है. So what do we get when we do that? We get 1 over x minus 2 whole square minus 1 and then plus 1. And that is 1 over x minus 2 whole squared. This is an expression for gf of x. ये आपके पास वो function तो आ गया. Now, what else do we have to do here? We have to find the range of gf. इसकी range निकालनी है. How can we do that? Any ideas? What do we do? What's the domain of this function? Any idea about that? What's the
So it is
domain of
domain
this
of the
function?
inner function.
It's the
f of x.
domain of the inner function, right? So इसकी gf of x की क्या domain होगी? जो f of x की domain है. And what's the domain of f of x? That's x greater than 5. So this function is defined for x greater than 5. This is the domain of this function. Domain of gf of x is the same as the domain of f. Right? जो inner function था f, उसकी जो domain है वही आपके composite function की domain है. So you've got this domain for the function. Now, given this domain, we can find the corresponding range. आपके पास ये domain है इस function की. It's a reciprocal function. We've done this before. We have to figure out the range of this function. So remember, reciprocal functions के अंदर कोई turning points नहीं होते, right? So we don't have to really worry about any turning points. We just have to look at what happens at extreme values. Extreme value मतलब end points of the domain, उस पे क्या हो रहा है? एक तो end point आपका 5 है एक तरह से, right? So you check what happens when x equals 5. x equals 5 पे देख लेते हैं. x की value अगर 5 input करते हैं, what value of the function do we get? We get gf of x or gf of 5. That equals 1 over 5 minus 2 whole square, and that is 1 over 9. एक तो हमारे पास ये value आ गई 1 over 9, which all of you got, although with sometimes an incorrect sign. But 1 over 9 एक हमारे पास end point होगा range का. So that's an important value that we have. But we also have to look at what happens on the other side. अगर x बहुत बड़ा हो जाए, what happens to this function in that case? If the value of x becomes extremely large, what will happen to this function? Now we discussed two ways of thinking about this. You can rather think of this in terms of infinity, or देखें x infinity की तरफ जाता है तो आपके function को क्या होता है, where does it go? Or one way to think about that was you just assume an extremely large number. x की value बहुत बड़ी कोई input कर दें. X की value बहुत बड़ी कोई input कर दें. So for example, you can try x equals 1 0 0 0 0. You can keep adding zeros as many as you want, or 9 9 9 9 9. Take a very large number and see what happens to your function. 1 over, put an extremely large value there, minus 2 whole square. Try putting this in your calculator and see what you get. What does your calculator give for this? You don't have to count the number of zeros I have on my screen. You can just add as many zeros as you want and then just see what you get. What's your calculator giving you?
1 into 10 raised to power minus 22.
1 into 10 is from minus 22, right? So it's an extremely small value. We can say it's just almost equal to 0. Not exactly 0, but it's almost equal to 0. So that's your other end point. The range आपके पास जो इस function की है, that is between these two values, between 0 and 1 over 9. You can write it like this if you want. You can write in terms of y if you want. Y is between 0 and 1 over 9. This is the range of this function. तो हमने डोमेन की एक्सट्रीम वैल्यूज पे देख लिया. 5 पे क्या हो रहा था, और जब x की वैल्यू बहुत लार्ज हो जाए तब क्या होता है, and we got these corresponding values for y from that. Okay, so the diagram shows the function f that is defined for x between minus 1 and 4. ठीक है? Where f of x is 3x minus 2 for x between minus 1 and 1, and f of x is 4 over 5 minus x for x between 1 and 4. So the function is defined in two parts, and you can see that on the graph as well. Graph पे भी आपको नजर आ रहा है. There's one part here, that's a straight line, and then there's another part that looks like this, that's a curve. So the function is defined in two separate parts. और उन दोनों की अलग-अलग equations, of course, because one is a straight line is 3x minus 2. The other one is a curve, the curve is 4 over 5 minus x. So ये दो parts में इस तरह से function defined है. अच्छा, first of all, we have to state the range of this function. Remember, range क्या होती है? Range is the values of y. Vertically आप कहाँ से कहाँ तक जा रहे हो. अच्छा, x की values दी हुई ना, we can mark them on the graph to make it easier. minus 1 से 4 तक जा रहे हैं ना. So we have the lowest value minus 1, then the highest value here is 4, and then where is the function changing? 1 के ऊपर आप एक part से दूसरे part पे shift कर रहे हो. That means this point here should be 1. So you've got these important points on the x-axis. What about the range of this function? How do you find the range of this function? Any idea? How do you find the range of this function?
We put in extreme values of x in the functions, minus 1 in the first one and 4 in the second one.
Yes,
Between
exactly.
minus
So
5 and 4.
between -5 and 4. Okay, let's see. Probably yes. That's probably correct. So what do? We look at the value of the function at this point. यहाँ पे x coordinate हमें पता है क्या है -1 है. We have to figure out the y coordinate. Similarly, we have to figure out the y coordinate here. The x coordinate is 4. What's the y coordinate? अब देखें नीचे वाले पॉइंट के अंदर स्ट्रेट लाइन वैलिड है. तो यहाँ पे जो -1 x की वैल्यू इनपुट करेंगे हम स्ट्रेट लाइन में इनपुट करेंगे. So we do that here. We say 3 into 1 minus 2. What do we get from that? Sorry, -1 minus 2. -1 अगर इनपुट करें, x की वैल्यू अगर -1 इनपुट करें, what value of the function do we get? We have to input that in the first function, remember, because यहाँ पे इस point में first function valid है. We get y equals 3 into -1 minus 2, and that is -5. So the y coordinate here is -5. ये -5 आ गया. Similarly, we have to figure out the y coordinate here, where the function has a value x equals 4. X की value 4 input कर दें. In the second function now, get 4 over 5 minus 4, and that is 4. So the y coordinate here is 4. So what's the range then? It's going from -5 to 4. -5 से 4 तक जा रहा है. Vertically जो graph है, -5 से लेकर 4 तक जा रहा है. Right? That's the range of the function. So that's what you write here. We say the range of the function f is f of x between -5 and 4. ठीक है, दोनों इंक्लूडेड है. लेकिन -1 के साथ भी इक्वालिटी का साइन था, 4 के साथ भी इक्वालिटी का साइन था. सो वी आर इंक्लूडिंग बोथ ऑफ देम. दोनों के साथ हम इक्वल का साइन डाल रहे हैं. दैट्स द रेंज ऑफ द फंक्शन. ठीक है, लेट्स लुक एट द सेकंड पार्ट. सेकंड पार्ट में कहता है कॉपी द डायग्राम एंड ऑन योर कॉपी स्केच द ग्राफ ऑफ y इक्वल्स f इनवर्स ऑफ x. जस्ट के बाद देखिए थर्ड पार्ट में उसने कहा है obtain expressions to define the function f inverse. तो आपको इनवर्स बाद में फाइंड करने का कहा है उसने, उसका ग्राफ ड्रॉ करने का पहले कह दिया. How can we draw the graph without even knowing what the function, what the expression is? How can we do that?
So we just reflect the graph in y is equals to x, in the line y is equals to x.
Yes, we just reflect the graph in the line y equals x. And how do we do that? We flip the coordinates. X coordinate y बन जाएगा, y coordinate x बन जाएगा. Right? So coordinates सब में change कर देना. So we have some important points. We've got one point here, that's -1 -5. Where does this point go? -1 -5 वाला point जो है, ये कहाँ चला जाएगा?
-5.
-5, 5 minus 1.
-5 -1, right? So we just flip the coordinates. So that point is going to be somewhere here, -2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say this is -5. And then this is 2, this is 1, this is -1. So -5 and -1. So that's one point that we have on the inverse function. एक point ये आ गया. अच्छा, we have another point on the other side. 4 4 तो वहीं पे रहेगा, right? Interchange भी कर दें, it's still 4 4. So ये point भी inverse के ऊपर आ गया आपके पास. What about this point? What are the coordinates of this point? What are the coordinates of this point? 1 के ऊपर. अब इसके अंदर इनपुट कर दें x की वैल्यू 1 इनपुट करें. What do you get? 3 into 1 minus 2. तो इस पे भी जो coordinates हैं, they are 1 and 1. Does that make sense? This is 1 and 1. Now we just join these points. हमें पता है left side पे तो straight line आएगी पहले. So we have a straight line like this. And then think of the y equals x line. वो कहाँ से जा रही होगी? Y equals x line is going to look something like this. This is the y equals x line. हम dotted कर देते हैं. इनवर्स का ग्राफ इस साइड पे कैसा आएगा, आप कैसे ज्वाइन करोगे इनको, कोऑर्डिनेट्स तो वही है जो एंड पॉइंट्स है, लेकिन आप उसके दूसरी साइड पे इनवर्स इस तरह से बना दो. That's your graph for f inverse of x. You can write that here. This is y equals f inverse of x. This is the graph for that. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Any questions on this? Achha, after this, we are asked to find the inverse function and also give the set of values which each expression is valid. तो जिस तरह से ये फंक्शन आपका ओरिजिनल डिफाइंड है उसी तरह से आपने इनवर्स फंक्शन निकालना है और उसको इसी फॉर्म में लिखते हैं कि उसकी डोमेन्स बताओ कि कौन सी एक्सप्रेशन किस डोमेन के लिए वैलिड है. So let's do that part now. Part 3. We've got the function. We've got two parts of the function. एक part function का क्या है? 3x minus 2. Where is that defined? That's defined for x between -1 and 1. That's one part of the function. इसका अलग से inverse find कर लेंगे. The other part of the function is f of x equals 4 over 5 minus x, and the domain for that is 1 to x and then 4. ये आपकी इसकी domain है. We find the inverse function for both of them separately. Okay, so we let y equals f of x, and then we have y equals 3x minus 2. From this we get x equals y plus 2 over 3, and the inverse from this part is x plus 2 over 3. Okay, expression तो हमारे पास ही आ गई. We will see what the domain is going to be in a moment. But then we also find the inverse of the other part. इसमें भी वही कर लेते हैं. We let y equals f of x, and then we say y equals 4 over 5 minus x. We multiply this on the other side, and that gives us 5y minus xy equals 4. X को subject बनाना है. We have xy equals 5y minus 4, and x equals 5y minus 4 over y. You can write it like this if you want. You can also write it like this. You can say it's 5 over y. Oh, sorry, 5 minus 4 over y. अलग-अलग से लिख सकते हैं इसको इस तरह से. It's your choice. It doesn't really matter. Both are okay. You can just leave it at this point as well. When you say the inverse is 5x minus 4 over x. This is your inverse expression for inverse here. ठीक है, दोनों की आपने expressions तो निकालनी. Now we have to write down, we have to give the set of values for which each expression is valid. यानी दोनों के अंदर x की कौन सी values हम input कर सकते हैं. What about this now?
Between -5 and 1 in the first one, and between 1 to 4 in the second one.
Yes, that's correct. So remember, it's not just going to be the same as this. आपने ये नहीं लिख देना कि this is -1 to 1 or that is 1 to 4 like before. ऐसे नहीं होएगा. Remember, जब inverse आप करते हो, domain और range interchange हो जाते हैं. And so you're basically looking for the range of of the first function. इसकी range इसकी domain होएगी और ये इस वाले की range आपके इस function की domain होएगी, right? But an easier way to think about this is actually to just look at the graph that you've drawn above. जो ऊपर आपने graph draw किया है, जो ऊपर आपने graph draw किया है, you can just have a look at that. Graph पे आपको नजर आ जाएगा clearly. जो left part है, what are the values of x that we have here? It's going from -5 to 1. -5 से 1 तक जा रहा है, जो आपका left वाला part है. ठीक है? So you say the domain for this is from -5 2 1। ठीक है, देखिए यहाँ पे उसने 1 इंक्लूड किया हुआ था, इसलिए हमने यहाँ पे उसकी कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग वैल्यू इंक्लूड किया। द सेकेंड पार्ट इज हियर, इट्स फ्रॉम 1 to 4। यहाँ पे आप क्या कह दोगे? दिस सेकेंड एक्सप्रेशन इज वैलिड फॉर x बिटवीन 1 to 4। यहाँ पे देखें उसने 1 नहीं इंक्लूड किया हुआ था, इसके जो कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग पॉइंट हमारे पास आ रहे 1, that we are also not going to include that, उस पर इक्वालिटी का साइन नहीं डालेंगे। So this is what we get. This is the inverse function. Now sometimes you might actually see in some of the other examples like this, उसने कहा होगा write down the inverse in a similar way as this function is written. अगर उसने ये कहा होता, just write it like that. You'll say f inverse of x is equal to a combination of these two functions. One is x plus 2 over 3, and that is defined for this domain. And then we have the second expression, which is 5x minus 4 over x. That is defined for x between 1 and 4. So this is the f inverse function written in a similar way as the original function above. Trigonometry, trigonometric functions में domain or range find करनी है. Let's start with this. So we have this function that's defined by f of x equals 3 cos x minus 2. Let's check the recording. That's still working. Okay. We have to first solve this equation. I'm not going to do all parts. The parts हमें पता है. I'm just going to ignore them. F of x equals 0. We want to solve this equation, right? This is 3 cos x minus 2 equals 0. You just need to solve this equation for this domain x between 0 and 2 pi. ठीक है, ये आपने इस equation को solve करना है. We've done this in trigonometry a lot of times. You will solve this. ठीक है, you'll find the basic angle cos positive है. Cos positive first or fourth quadrants के अंदर होएगा. First or fourth quadrants के अंदर you will write down the values in radians. ठीक है, ये आप कर लेंगे. Let's look at the second part. In the second part, it says find the range of f. इस function की range figure out करनी है. The function is f of x equals 3 cos of x minus 2. That's what the function is. And the domain is given to be x between 0 and 2 pi. How do you find the range of this function? अच्छा देखें, उसने part 3 में फिर कहा है sketch the graph of y equals f of x. You could actually think about the graph as well and do it with that, but you can actually do this without the graph as well. Graph के बगैर भी आप सोच सकते हैं. But either way, what's the range of this function? How do you figure this out? Any ideas? How do you find the range of this function? No idea? Remember what the graph of the cos function looks like? It's something like this in general. Not like this. Make it better. Something like this. That's the graph of cos x. We've got some transformation of cos 3 से multiply हो रहा है और फिर 2 subtract हो रहा है. So we've got a stretch and then we have a translation. We've got two things happening. Amplitude बढ़ रहा है और फिर baseline change हो रही है trigonometry के terms में. You can think about that. The graph इसका कैसे change होगा and then think of the range. That's one idea. You could do that. But there's a quicker way of thinking about it, and that is we know कि cos की maximum और minimum values क्या होती हैं? Cos of x की maximum minimum values, cos we know goes from -1 to 1. आपने ये चेक कर लेना आपका पीरियड पूरा हो रहा है ना एक, अगर तो पीरियड पूरा हो रहा है, because otherwise अगर देखें for example this is the graph of cos, if the period is from 0 to 2 pi, it's one complete cycle, then we know कि अच्छा minimum value क्या होती है, minimum value is -1 and the maximum value is 1, right? So cos is between -1 and 1. अगर पूरा cycle complete नहीं होता, if you had only from 0 to let's say pi over 2, फिर वो -1 और 1 के दरम्यान में नहीं होता, फिर आप उसको चेंज करते हैं, फिर आप कहते हैं 0 से 1 तक जा रहा है सर. इन दैट केस अगर आपकी डोमेन रिस्ट्रिक्टेड होती, अगर आपका एक साइकिल कंप्लीट नहीं हो रहा होता, अगर आपका सिर्फ इतना पार्ट होता, देन यू वुड से इट्स 0 to 1. बट अगर साइकिल कंप्लीट हो रहा है, कंप्लीट साइकिल में वी नो cos is between -1 and 1. That's pretty clear. Okay, complete cycle mein that's true. So what we do in such functions is we just think about the extreme values of cos, because they get cos is the only variable here. Cos is the only thing that cos of x is the only thing that's changing here. 3 तो constant है, -2 भी एक constant number है. तो हम सिर्फ देख लेते हैं कि अच्छा जब cos की वैल्यू -1 होती है, एक एक्सट्रीम वैल्यू वहां से आ गई हमारे पास, एक वैल्यू 1, एक वहां से आ गई. अब इन दोनों के ऊपर चेक कर ले फंक्शन की क्या वैल्यू है. So once what you do is you input cos x equals -1 in this function. -1 input करते हैं और देखें आपके पास function की value उसके ऊपर क्या आती है. So when cos x is -1, you get 3 into -1 -2, and that is -5. ये आपके पास एक value आ गई function की. And then look at the other extreme of cos, and that is 1. When cos is 1, the value of the function is 3 into 1 -2, and that is 1. So the function is going to be between -5 and 1. The range of the function will be between -1 and 1 like this. -5 and 1. That's the range of this function. तो आपने क्या किया, cos की जो extreme values थी वो आपने input कर दी function के अंदर. Cos could be either -1, that's the minimum value of cos. The maximum value of cos is 1. आपने उन दोनों वैल्यूज को इनपुट कर दिया फंक्शन के अंदर, उन पे देख ले फंक्शन की वैल्यू क्या आती है. So you've got extreme values for the function from that, which are -5 and 1. So that's the range of the function. ठीक है, चलें. Let's look at the next part. It says sketch the graph of y equals f of x. अब उसका ग्राफ स्केच करना है. 3 cos x minus 2, right? ये आपने इसका ग्राफ बनाना है. What's the interval? The interval is from 0 to 2 pi. Let me write that here. F of x equals 3 cos of x minus 2. And the domain that we are given is from 0 to 2 pi. That's the domain that we're given. So now we need to draw or sketch the graph of this function. Now remember cos की shape क्या होती है? It looks like this. So you have to know the shape, and then you can just take some points and join the curve using those points. ये shape हो सकती है, कभी हो सकता है इसके reflection आ जाए, right? अगर आपके पास -3 cos x होता तो ये reflect हो जाएगा, हो सकता है ये upside down हो. यही दो possibilities आपके पास हो सकती हैं. There's no other possibility, right? अगर complete graph होएगा, it'll look like this. अगर इसका कुछ part हो सकता है, लेकिन shape यही होगी, ठीक है? So what you do is you take some points. You take some points between 0 and 2 pi. वही आपकी domain है, right? Let's draw that. You've got 0. अच्छा, मिनिमम मैक्सिमम वैल्यूज आपने देखी थी कहां से कहां तक जा रही थी, -5 से 1 तक आपकी वैल्यूज जा रही हैं. तो अपना y एक्सिस आपने उसके हिसाब से रखना है. I'll have to extend this a bit. I'll remove some of the positive part. I don't need to go that far. -5 से 1 तक रेंज है ना, तो y एक्सिस के ऊपर this is what I need. This is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. I've got some values in the y-axis, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. And then I need to go from 0 to 2 pi. This is 0. Let's say 2 pi is here. In the middle, we're going to have pi and pi over 2 here, and then 3 pi over 2. All you have to do is take some points, take these points, and देख लें values क्या आ रही हैं. Or you already know जब x अच्छा नहीं खैर input करके देख लें. Cos की value 0 input कर दें, x की value 0 input कर दें. What do you get? Cos of 0 is 1. You will get 1. You'll get the first point here. आपने points ले लेना, ठीक है? x, y के values ले लें. You don't have to write them down. आप बस directly points plot करते जाएं. 0 पे 1 आ गया. Pi over 2 input करेंगे cos के अंदर. What do you get? Cos of pi over 2 is 0. 0 पे -2, ये तो -2 पे चला जाएगा. ठीक है. At pi, cos is -1. 3 into -1 is -3. ये -5 पे चला जाएगा. Then you'll have this and this. This is how the graph is going to look like. आपने यहाँ से उस तरह से आपको पता है cos curve किस तरह की होती है. आपने वो curve यहाँ से बना दी. This is the graph of this function. Is that okay with this?
सर for part 2 वो जो रेंज हमें पता है -1 and 1 वाली in trigonometry we did like अगर different range हो तो हम उसमें directly multiply और add कर लेते थे. So do we need to show all this working या can we do it directly?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. आपने क्या कहा? What
Like
did we do in trigonometry?
like we know that the range for cos x is -1 to 1 and we
Yes.
multiply 3 and subtract 2 from both
Yes.
sides.
Yes. You can also do that. So that's correct. You could also you could say 3 cos x, 3 से multiply कर दें. What do you get? You get -1, -3, 2, 3, and then you have 3 cos x -2, and that gives you -5 to 1. You can also do it that way. उसमें मसला सिर्फ ये होता है अगर आप यहाँ पे माइनस से मल्टीप्लाई हो रहा हो ना फिर वो माइनस से मल्टीप्लाई करते हैं तो आपके इनइक्वालिटी साइंस चेंज होते हैं. That sometimes confuses some people. But if you're comfortable with this, you can do that. That's fine. आपको इसमें working show नहीं करनी होती. यहाँ पे जो आपके range में marks हैं, they are just for writing this down. You can do it mentally if you want. You don't have to show any working for this. आप जिस तरह मर्जी कर सकते हैं.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's look at the next part. So then it says a function g is defined by g of x equals this. It's the same expression, 3 cos x minus 2, but now it's from 0 to k. We don't know what k is. It says state the maximum value of k for which g has an inverse. We've got this function, g of x, that is 3 cos x minus 2. X is between 0 and k. State the maximum value of k for which g has an inverse. What do you think? When does the function have inverse? When does the function have inverse? What's the condition for having an inverse? The function should be
One-to-one
a
function.
one-to-one function. You are starting from 0. You are given k, starting point 0 है, 0 से start करना है आपने. So it's a one-to-one function at this point as well. It's still one-to-one. You can keep going on until you reach that turning point. This point tak, it's still a one-to-one function. But if you were to go beyond this turning point, just like we used to do in quadratic, for quadratic functions, turning points को cross कर लेंगे अगर फिर आपका ग्राफ 1-to-1 अगर आपके उसके अंदर आ रहा है So आप turning point दरमियान में कहीं पर आ रहे हैं, that means it's no longer a one-to-one function. So maximum value of k for which g has an inverse would be this turning point, the x coordinate of this turning point. इस point से आगे नहीं जा सकते आप, इस point से आगे नहीं जा सकते, because then it will no longer remain a one-to-one function. So what do you say here? Maximum possible k, maximum possible k is equal to pi. If यहाँ पे x coordinate है pi, that's the value of this k. ठीक है, pi से छोटा हो सकता है, इससे बड़ा नहीं हो सकता. Is that okay? Any problem with this?
No, sir.
Acha. Now we have to obtain an expression for g inverse of x. G का inverse निकालना है. Let's do that. We've got g of x that equals 3 cos x minus 2. Again, what do we have to do for inverse? We have to make x the subject. So we say let y equal g of x. And that gives us y equals 3 cos x minus 2. And 3 cos x equals y plus 2. Cos x equals y plus 2 over 3. And then you just take cos inverse on the other side. Cos inverse of y plus 2 over 3. So the inverse is going to be cos inverse of x plus 2 divided by 3. That's the inverse function. ठीक है, pretty straightforward. आपने बस x को सब्जेक्ट बना दिया, cos जब दूसरे साइड पे जाएगा तो cos inverse हो जाएगा. अब यहाँ पे उसने पूछा तो नहीं है, but अगर वो आपसे डोमेन पूछ ले for this function, that will just be the range of g of x, right? जो g की रेंज है आपको नजर आ रही है -5 to 1, वो इसकी डोमेन हो जाएगी अगर उसने पूछी होती. और जो ओरिजिनल फंक्शन की डोमेन है वो इसकी रेंज बन जाएगी, राइट? अगर उसने पूछी होती तो यहाँ पे आपको सिर्फ एक्सप्रेशन लिखना था. Yes, let's try this. This is question number 14 from the worksheet. We have this function f that is such that f of x equals 2 sine square x minus 3 cos square x, and the domain that we're given is x between 0 and pi. Okay, that's the domain that we're given. We have to express first of all f of x in the form a plus b cos square x. इस फॉर्म में रिप्रेजेंट करना. ठीक है, क्या मतलब? साइन स्क्वायर की जगह आपने cos square लेकर आना है किसी तरह से. So what can you do? You can just replace sine square with 1 minus cos square. So this is 2 into 1 minus cos square x minus 3 into cos square x. You simplify this, you get 2 minus 5 cos square x. Okay, इस फॉर्म में आपने रिप्रेजेंट कर दिया उसको. That's the first part. Sine square को आपने eliminate करना था. Okay, now let's look at the second part. Second part में कहता है state the greatest and the least values of f of x. So essentially we're looking for the range of f, right? उसकी minimum or maximum value find करनी है, range find करनी है. That's what you want to do here in the second part. What do we get? How do we think about this? How do we think about this? Anyone? Range कैसे find करें इसकी? You just learned how to do that, right? क्या कर सकते हैं? Any ideas?
We'll take cos x as 1 and minus 1, bari, and then see the corresponding value of y.
Yeah, so we know cos x is between -1 and 1. ये तो हमें पता है ना? So can we just input these values and check what we get? Let's try cos of x equals -1. Let's see what we get from that. एफ ऑफ एक्स हमारे पास क्या आ जाएगा 2 minus 5 into minus 1 का square. Remember we have a square there as well. That becomes minus 3. Let's input cos of x equals 1. What do we get from that? We get f of x equals 2 minus 5 into 1 का square, and that is also minus 3. And that's always going to be true because minus 1 का square भी वही होता है और 1 का square भी वही होता है. तो अगर आपके पास ये square function आ जाएगा, square function like this, तो फिर तो minus 1 और 1 के ऊपर दोनों पे आपको same values मिल रही होंगी. The problem is the graph looks like this. This is the graph of the cos function. कुछ पार्ट नीचे है जो -1 के ऊपर जा रहे हैं और कुछ पार्ट ऊपर है जो 1 के ऊपर. फॉर एग्जांपल मैक्सिमम वैल्यू 1 है. जब स्क्वायर कर देंगे आप इसको, जब स्क्वायर कर देंगे, व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन? द पार्ट दैट वी हैव बिलो द एक्स एक्सिस, दैट्स गोइंग टू कम अप लाइक दिस. वो पार्ट ऊपर आ जाएगा, वो पार्ट स्क्वायर होके ऊपर आ जाएगा. The curve is going to look something like this. Does that make sense? Does this make sense to everyone? तो नीचे वाला पॉइंट जब स्क्वायर आपका हो जाएगा तो नेगेटिव तो पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा ना. We can't have a value that's on the negative side. तो ये जो नीचे वाला पार्ट जब स्क्वायर कर देंगे, yes, वैल्यूज भी सारी थोड़ी सी चेंज हो जाएंगी. So let me actually draw another graph. आपका ग्राफ जो है स्क्वायर में नेगेटिव साइड से ऊपर इस तरह आ जाएगा. कुछ नेगेटिव वाला पार्ट जो है ना, that cannot be there when you have a square function. क्योंकि नेगेटिव तो y हो ही नहीं सकता. अगर हम इसकी बात करें, cos x की बात करें, this is cos x, this is cos square x. तो नेगेटिव पॉइंट में आपका ग्राफ नहीं जा सकता. Is that okay to everyone? Is this point clear? अब होगा क्या, -1 वाली वैल्यू तो ऊपर 1 पे चले जाएगी. सो cos स्क्वायर की जो डोमेन होती है, cos स्क्वायर की जो रेंज होती है, दैट इज बिटवीन 0 and 1. क्योंकि वो नेगेटिव साइड पे तो जा नहीं सकता. तो मिनिमम वैल्यू जो cos स्क्वायर की हो सकती है वो 0 होती है. तो जब आपका स्क्वायर फंक्शन आ जाएगा, साइन स्क्वायर या cos स्क्वायर, व्हाट आर यू गोइंग टू डू देयर? यू गोइंग टू से cos स्क्वायर जो होता है वो 0 और 1 के दरमियान में होता है, राइट? बिकॉज स्क्वायर फंक्शन नेगेटिव साइड पे तो नहीं जा सकता. सो इसमें आप 0 और 1 वैल्यूज इनपुट करोगे rather than inputting -1 and 1. तो जब आपका स्क्वायर फंक्शन आता है, you input 0 and 1. So you'll once input 0 here. 0 पे देखेंगे क्या वैल्यू आती है. cos x की वैल्यू 0 इनपुट कर दें, cos स्क्वायर की एक ही बात है, cos स्क्वायर की वैल्यू 0 इनपुट कर दें, ये cos x की कर दें, एक ही बात है. 2 minus 5 into 0 square, what do we get? We get 2 from that. So now these are the two kind of values that we're getting. 2 and -3. We say the range of this function, which was f of x, is between these two numbers, that's -3 and 2. Okay? What's the takeaway from this? Let me just write down these values first. This is the greatest value. What's the greatest least values पूछी थी? This is the least value. What's the takeaway from this? जब आपके पास एक ट्रिग्नोमेट्रिक फंक्शन होगा, अगर उसका पीरियड कंप्लीट हो रहा है, एक साइकिल कंप्लीट हो रहा है, या फिर उसकी वैल्यूज जो है, अच्छा यहाँ पे ये भी चीज इंपॉर्टेंट है, cos is going from x की वैल्यू 0 से लेकर पाई तक है. तो cos कहां से कहां तक जा रहा है? ये जा रहा है 0 से लेकर पाई तक. इसमें आपकी रेंज वाइज तो -1 से -1 तक जा ही रहा है in any case, so we don't have to worry about that. लेकिन यहाँ पे आपको देखना पड़ेगा कि आपका साइकिल कंप्लीट हो रहा है नहीं हो रहा. अगर नहीं कंप्लीट हो रहा तो आपको देखना है कि अच्छा रेंज फिर उस इंटरवल में कितनी है. 0 से लेकर पाई तक तो आपको पता है cos जो है वो 1 से लेकर -1 तक चला जाता है, तो पूरी डोमेन को, पूरी रेंज को कवर कर रहा है ऑलरेडी. उसको स्क्वायर कर देंगे तो वो 0 और 1 के दरमियान में हो जाएगा. सो इन जनरल व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू डू नाउ इज, व्हेन वी हैव अ कंप्लीट साइकिल, साइन और cos दोनों जो हैं वो -1 और 1 के दरमियान में होंगे. आपने एक -1 पे वैल्यू चेक कर लेनी है और 1 पे वैल्यू चेक कर लेनी है. ठीक है? When we have a square trigonometric function, cos square या sin square, उसमें आपकी इनकी वैल्यूज किसके दरम्यान में होंगी? 0 और 1 के दरम्यान. तो आपने 0 पे चेक कर लेना है और 1 पे चेक कर लेना है. You will get their corresponding values. So this is the range that we get of the greatest and least possible values of the function. Any questions? No? Okay. Let's look at the third part. Third part उसने क्या कहा है? Solve the equation f of x plus 1 equals 0. You can do that. F of x plus 1 equals 0. That all that means is you have to solve f of x हमने already form में convert कर दिया. फिर 2 minus 5 cos square form के अंदर इसमें plus 1 कर दें. तो 2 minus 5 cos square x plus 1 equals 0. ये equation आपने solve करनी है. We are given the domain. Interval given है आपको. आप x की values निकाल लेंगे. ठीक है, we've done this in trigonometry multiple times. You can do that. अच्छा, there's one point that's very important here, and that is आप इस function की directly range नहीं निकाल सकते. Directly इस function की range नहीं निकाल सकते. Okay? You first have to convert it to either only cos square or only sin square. या सिर्फ sin square में convert कर दें या सिर्फ cos square में convert कर दें. एक function में convert करना जरूरी है. उसके बाद range निकाल सकते हैं. उसके बगैर नहीं निकाल सकते हैं range. ठीक है? Because otherwise you would think कि अच्छा maximum value कैसे आएगी? यहाँ पे 1 input कर दूं, sin की जगह cos में 1 input कर दूं. या दोनों में, so you could think of all possible combinations. Let's say एक दफा 1 और minus 1 input कर दिया, एक दफा 0 और 1 करना था ना, तो एक दफा आपने किया 1 और 1 input कर दिया, एक दफा आपने 0 और 1 input कर दिया, एक दफा आपने 1 और 0 input कर दिया. So you may think कि अच्छा आपने सारे combinations पे देख लिया क्या हो रहा है. But that's not going to work because sin और cos दोनों की वैल्यू एक पॉइंट पे 1 नहीं हो सकती. एक सिंगल वैल्यू ऑफ x के ऊपर दोनों sin और cos 1 नहीं हो सकते. जब sin 1 होएगा तो cos 0 होएगा या कुछ और होएगा, -1 हो सकता है depending on where the graph is. 1 1 दोनों इकट्ठे नहीं हो सकते. So you can't do it like this. जब भी आपको रेंज निकालनी है, आपको पहले सिंगल फंक्शन में कन्वर्ट करना पड़ेगा. इसलिए उसने आपको यहाँ से वहां पे करवा लिया. वो पहले उसने आपसे पहले कहा कि इसको सिर्फ cos स्क्वायर में कन्वर्ट करें, उसके बाद आपसे उसने रेंज पूछी. ठीक है? So you will first have to do this. You'll first have to convert it to a single function and then you can find the range. अगर उसने ना भी कहा होता यहाँ पे, आपको खुद से वो करना पड़ता पहले. उसके बाद फिर आप ये -1 1 0 वाला मेथड आप अप्लाई कर सकते हैं. ठीक है? I hope that's clear to everyone. This is very similar. I'm going to be very quick about this. You've got this function 5 sin square x plus 3 cos square x is defined for the domain 0 to pi. It's f of x equals 5 sin square x plus 3 cos square x. You need to convert it to this form. Sin square में convert करना है, तो आप क्या करेंगे? सिर्फ cos square की जगह लिख देंगे 1 minus sin square. So you have 5 sin square x plus 3 into 1 minus sin square x, and that gives us 5 sin square x plus 3 minus 3 sin square x, and that is 3 plus 2 sin square x in that form. उसने कहा था. ठीक है? So we're done with that. Second part says, hence find the values of x for which f of x equals 7 sin x. आपने equation solve करनी है, या आप कर सकते हैं. Second part में just have to solve this equation. 3 plus 2 sin square x equals 7 sin x. Your quadratic equation in sin x. We've done this so many times in trigonometry. You can do that. Let's do the third part. Third part में वो क्या कहता है? State the range of f. Range of f, इसकी आपने range निकालनी है. How do you do that? It's 3 plus 2 sin square x, and the domain is from 0 to pi. 0 से लेकर pi तक है. Remember sin का function कैसा होता है? This is what the sin function looks like. 0 से pi तक इसकी क्या range होएगी? ये तो वैसे negative side पे जा ही नहीं रहा 0 से pi तक. It's in the range in the given domain, in the given interval, It's only going from 0 to 1. ठीक है, ये सिर्फ 0 से 1 पे जा रहा है. स्क्वायर में तो आपने वैसे भी 0 1 ही चेक करना होता है इन एनी केस. अब क्या करोगे, एक दफा आप sin x की वैल्यू 0 इनपुट कर दोगे. यू सी व्हाट यू गेट फ्रॉम दैट, f of x इक्वल्स, क्योंकि आपको पता है कि sin square x जो है वो क्या होगा, sin square x is going to be between 0 and 1. Sin square x की जगह पर 0 input कर दिया. What do you get? You get 3 plus 2 into 0. That gives you 3. और sin square की जगह एक दफा 1 input कर दिया. What do you get from that? You get 3 plus 2 into 1. And that is 5. Right? This is the range of the function. Again, you don't have to show this working necessarily. You can do it directly if you want. If you're comfortable with this, आप directly भी range लिख सकते हो उसको mentally calculate करके, and that's perfectly okay. The range is, because यहाँ पे लिखा भी होता है state. State का मतलब होता है you don't have to show any working, you can just write down the final result. So the range here turns out to be between 3 and 5. That's the range of this function. Someone asked. This is again very similar concept वो use करना है, but now it's the other way around. You're given the maximum and minimum value, उसको use करके आप use करना है, ठीक है? So in the first part, you are given, there's a function f of x, and that is a minus b cos x, and it's defined for x between 0 degrees and 360 degrees. A and b are constants. Maximum value of f of x is 10, and the minimum value is minus 2. Maximum and minimum values उसने आपको बता दिए. आपको क्या पता है maximum minimum values कैसे आती हैं? Cos एक दफा -1 इनपुट कर देंगे, एक दफा +1 इनपुट कर देंगे. Because we know कि cos किसके दरम्यान में होता है? Cos is between -1 and 1. That's the interval that we have for cos. So let's see what happens if we input cos x equals -1 here. Cos x की value -1 input कर दें. What do we get? We get a minus b into -1, and that is a plus b. एक ये value आ गई हमारे पास. Cos x अगर 1 input कर दें, what do we get? We get a minus b into 1, and that is a minus b. These are the two values that we get. ठीक है? Cos x minus 1 और cos x minus 1 के ऊपर, cos x 1 के ऊपर. ठीक है? A plus b and a minus b. Now you see it says a and b are positive constants. तो इसमें से कौन सी value बड़ी है? A plus b or a minus b? Which one is bigger?
A plus B.
Which one is bigger?
A plus B.
A plus b should be bigger, right? Because दोनों positive constants है तो plus करेंगे तो बड़ा number होएगा. That means the maximum value should be this one. A plus b की value क्या होनी चाहिए? This should be 10. ये क्या होना चाहिए? This should be -2. उसने दिया हुआ है ना, minimum value -2 है. So you can say a plus b equals 10 and a minus b equals -2. And you can find the values of a and b from this. ठीक है, इसमें elimination कर लें, you get 2a equals 8 and a equals 4. And you can say then 4 plus b equals 10 and b equals 6. A is equal to 4 and b equals 6. Is that okay to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Any questions on this? This is one way to do this. This is one way to do this. Another idea could have been to think of transformations. Remember, transformations में क्या होता था? देखिए -2 से 1 तक जा रहे हैं ना, -2 से लेकर 10 तक जा रहे हैं. ओरिजिनल ग्राफ कहाँ से कहाँ तक जाता है? -1 से 1 तक. उसका एम्पलीट्यूड क्या होता था? एम्पलीट्यूड क्या होता था ओरिजिनल ग्राफ का? It was 1. What's the amplitude of this? -2 से 10 पे जाएगा जब ग्राफ, एम्पलीट्यूड क्या होएगा? टोटल देखें, आपकी रेंज जो बन रही है, that is from -2 to 10. एम्पलीट्यूड कहाँ से मेजर करते हैं? बेस लाइन से. बेस लाइन से एम्पलीट्यूड मेजर करते हैं, तो आपका कितना ये डिस्टेंस बन रहा है? 12 का हाफ कर दें तो एम्पलीट्यूड आपका क्या बन जाएगा? एम्पलीट्यूड इज गोइंग टू बी 6. दैट मीन्स बी की वैल्यू यहाँ पे 6 होनी चाहिए. सिमिलरली बेस लाइन कहाँ पे चलेगी? बेस लाइन इनके मिड पॉइंट के ऊपर है. दैट मिड पॉइंट इज गोइंग टू बी 4. तो बेस लाइन आपका ये ए रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा होता है, तो ए की वैल्यू क्या हो जानी चाहिए? ए की वैल्यू यहाँ पे 4 हो जानी चाहिए. सो यू could potentially find the values using transformations as well. That's quicker, but that's relatively harder to think. So those of you who understand this well, you can do it directly as well. But this is an easier way to think of, although it takes slightly longer. So you can choose whichever method you prefer. All right.